You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Wellborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. Joining him is everyone's favorite coach and hair model, Chris, aka Tex McQuilkin, Power Athlete's Director of Performance. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
We were inspired.
Johnny, how old are you turning tomorrow?
47.
Oh, shit.
I'm
Crazy.
not old. I'm only 47.
Oh, I felt my age last night when I was at jiu-jitsu and one of the guys asked me a question and he's like, what year was that? I was like, 1997. He's like, oh, that was the year after or the year before I was born. I looked at him and I was like, these kids.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. In the 90s.
Yeah, it's like that means you grew up in the 2000s, 2010s.
Yeah. Right. Like you already had a whole NFL career and were running a business at that point.
Yeah. Well, the guy asked me a question about longevity. He's like, how do you stay motivated to do stuff for a long period of time? And I told him motivation fades. Just get into the habit of shit.
Yep.
Well, and then eventually you
That's
actually
what we've been
feel
talking
like
about.
shit if you don't do the thing.
Yeah.
There is a negative feedback loop on this thing. You know?
Oh yeah. No, it's interesting deal. I try to tell them, just blind consistency will get you much farther than motivation. I feel like everybody's waiting for inspiration and motivation. Just keep soldiering on.
Not Matt Vincent. He feels it every day.
Well,
And
So
he's not dead yet.
well, he's
that's true. Not dead yet.
I did God damn it. Did I tell you did I say it to you? I can't remember who I said it to. I was like, did he workshop this with anybody?
No, you sent it to me and
We're
he did.
rolling, team. Just a heads up.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. Well, we have the editing process too. But
So I did, I'll have you know, spend a few minutes this morning studying UT Austin dorms. And I think I identified the appropriate dorm for Georgia.
Jacinto?
Should she go
San
there?
Jacinto?
San Jacinto is the
Oh,
name
yeah.
of the dorm.
yeah, it's on San Jacinto Street.
Yes.
I'm leaving a bag packed in your little guest room by the pool.
It's actually pronunciated Jacinto. San
Jacinto.
Jacinto.
You mean they pronounce the J in it?
Jacinto.
San Jacinto.
It's
Just
it's like when you go to Blanco, they pronounce it Blanco, and if you say Blanco, they get mad at you. No, it's Blanco, and you're like, it's not Blanco, but I get it.
What was
Here
the
in
name
San
of that
Francisco.
town in Colorado that they totally?
Buena Vista.
Yeah, there's a town in Colorado that everyone pronounces Buena Vista, and you're like, no.
Even
No.
here in the city,
No.
there's Juliet was like, you just turn right on Guerrero Street. I'm like, you mean Guerrero?
Kelly's like Guerrero.
Did you roll your R's? Guerrero. Does this mean
Guerrero.
Georgia's coming to UT?
Right
Well,
now.
As of right now, there's two schools out in the open. Cal, chances are 0 that she'll get in there. And then she is waiting for University of Michigan, which still is her number 1 over Austin, but
They're the same school.
they're the same school. So I don't know. I think it could be a bit of a toss up. So we learn about both of those on Friday, and then we can finally just make a decision.
Michigan is very cool and has the
Yeah.
greatest, just great situation. You probably played there, so you know.
I never did, but just seeing the pictures of the football stadium would definitely influence somebody to go there. I mean, as a student to be able to go, what's it 106,000 people in that stadium? It looks amazing.
Unlike UT Austin, which has no school spirit.
The only knock on UT Austin for Georgia, I'll tell you, is that they're
crappy football team.
No, well, I don't know. I haven't followed that, but even bigger when you're an 18-year-old girl is that their school color is burnt orange, and nobody likes the color burnt orange, and it doesn't look good on anybody. So when you're an 18-year-old girl, that's actually a factor in your decision. Do I look good in burnt
That's
orange?
not G is
I
stoked
really
because-
think that's a decision. I mean, it's a factor for parents too. I don't want to have to buy all this burnt orange clothing because you went there when we already have blue and gold.
Kelly and I don't look good in burnt orange.
No,
that's
and
true.
you guys already have all this blue and gold that just ports over perfectly for Michigan.
Well, you guys have an intern already built in and a babysitter if Georgia comes. I'm like, it's so like, you can't believe how much better your life will get when George is in town. Cause we have so many friends in Austin and a lot of businesses. And I think for Georgia going into economics, I think it actually makes great sense for her to end up in Austin, believe it or not.
Well, I'm a little nervous that maybe my daughters will be trying to babysit for Georgia, seeing as they're 12 this year, going on 40. Just the
Yep.
conversations I have with them, I'm like, how old are you guys? What is going on here? So one of our, I'd like to, I know this is going to sound funny, but I kind of refuse to buy them expensive clothes because they grow so fast, and everything they get, they just absolutely decimate. And one of our friends, she's like a big time realtor. She's like, oh, I have like 300 pairs of jeans. Do you know, I'm trying to get rid of them. Can I drop them off? She dropped us off like a cart, like a case of these like Hudsons and all these high end stuff. And the girls are like rhinestones and all this, and they're like putting on all these jeans. I'm like, oh my God, dude, how old are you guys? You guys look like
Rhinestone jeans.
Oh yeah,
So-
like bedazzles, the whole deal.
Cougars.
So
Yeah.
you'll appreciate this. You know, we were sponsored by Reebok for so many years, like 10 years or something. Were you sponsored by them at some
No.
point? No, but we
No.
were.
They hated you.
It was like yeah, they didn't like you. It was like an embarrassment of riches. And, you know, we had Reebok stuff, you know, everywhere. But once our kids got to be like early teens, tweens, they were kind of
all
like,
about the Adidas.
yeah, they were
Superstar.
anti Reebok, and they're like, whatever, whoever would wear those, you know, any Reebok stuff. And then literally our sponsorship with them ends. And now the hottest tennis shoe, if you are a high school kid, is like a white classic Reebok. And so we've been actually buying those like
think
with our
Steve
own money.
Carell, he's the 40-year-old virgin Reebok. That shoe, like
That shoe.
that just says I have no pull. I don't like birth control shoes. That's what the kids are
But
wearing.
it's all the rage. It's the rage.
And they're like, could you restart your sponsorship? I'm like, fuck right off, you girls.
Yeah,
we were
I
cool before you
coach
even knew it.
High school boys, and they're all in the dad New Balances.
Oh, they were
Dude.
Like
the
it's just
608.
ironically funny. Yeah.
John, wait, is that the 608? Is that the denim 608?
So the 608, I think they're either 806s or 608s. They probably have both of them. Those are the preferred car shoe of old men at car shows. So like whenever we go to a Cars and Coffee or like go to anything that has a car show, they'll be old men. It's almost like they got a newsletter over the age of 60. It's like you have to buy these shoes. You have to buy a motorhome or a fifth wheel.
How funny.
And then take a
And
cruise.
then these specific shoes.
Yeah,
Tex,
and
you're talking
these-
about your like lacrosse boys?
Yes. So like football player, cool kids in school, just wearing those because they're comfortable and that they just want to be funny, I guess.
Just saw an article
Well,
that
I mean, Crocs are still a
Yeah,
thing.
the
I mean,
Croc-
Crocs
the
are still a
Croc
thing.
my deal is the only people who are allowed to wear Crocs are babies and doctors. Anybody outside of that, I just want to stomp on your toes.
Yeah. Well, we, you know, as you know, we're like deep into the water polo scene, and all the kids in water polo wear Crocs around the pool, and it hurts us.
The other one the kids are all wearing is they have like fancy Birkenstocks now that are like white and different colors. And every time I see them, I like get a flashback of Berkeley. If I catch like a sniff of patchouli and see Birkenstocks, I just kind of like feel like I'm gonna melt down from just
you need a Blondie's
Well,
pizza.
you know, Birkenstocks,
hot dog me immediately.
Birkenstocks also came back into fashion for like the middle-aged mom, you know, like 5 years ago, and like all middle-aged moms were wearing Birkenstocks. And I have this photo of myself that you can appreciate, John, as a freshman at Cal in like the edge of Sproul Plaza, like right on the corner of Bancroft and Telegraph by those little huts where they sold food.
Yeah.
And I am wearing like these horrible jeans. It's kind of a grunge look with this sort of like baggy flannel and Birkenstocks. And I look horrible.
With socks or no unsocks?
No socks. But like every time I'm in Nordstrom and I see the giant amount of like middle-aged mom directed Birkenstock shoes, I conjure that photo and I'm like, didn't look good on me then. It's not going to look good on me now. And I just keep on walking.
Whatever.
When Kate got pregnant with the twins, she was wearing the Dr. Scholl's slip-on clog wooden shoes, you know, with the strap, because her feet were expanding into Legos. So she couldn't necessarily wear shoes anymore. So she was just wearing those slip-ons, and they have like an adjustable strap. So they just kept getting more and more adjustable. And then she finally got to the point where like her Lego feet didn't fit in there anymore. And that's when I bought the Normatec boots, and we're like trying to pump the swelling out of her feet so she felt normal. So yeah, we still have those. We moved and we just threw those away. Like never getting those again.
Kelly could really tell you, John, that before knowing you, he had a real serious clog phase. In fact, when I met him,
Yeah, fuck yeah. The clogs are cool. And then the clogs came back. I was wearing like Dansko clogs. That was like the mountain fashion. You get out of your kayak on your Dansko clogs. Fuck yeah.
Oh God damn
point
it.
of fact,
Wool
Kelly.
socks, Dansko clogs.
Point of fact, Kelly wore clogs to his first wedding. There's
They
a lot. There's
they
a
were
lot for you guys to unpack there.
Black dress clogs.
Clogs, dress clogs to his first wedding.
That's how you know it's not his, not the one forever. Because when you wear clogs to something, there's no longevity in it. I know what I'm getting you for your birthday for the rest of your life. It's just different sets of clogs. Like, wow, another
It's
set
fair.
of clogs.
I would say like that's fair, and they'll last forever too. Dude, I would slip those fuckers on right now and cruise around in my shorts and my vest. Take the trash out.
They're kind of like an Olympic lifting shoe.
They are an
and
Olympic
and
lifting
they're,
shoe. Yeah.
You know, they're
Yeah.
stiff and wooden.
Yeah, they're
They weren't
wooden
wooden.
soles. Yeah.
But basically, yeah.
Yeah, my mom wore them in the 70s when she was pregnant. Like she was like, "Oh my god!" Like I remember she used to garden in them, and I remember being like, "What are those, Dutch girl?" And then when Kate got pregnant, I bought her the same ones. And when we moved, she found them. She just like threw them away. I'm like, "Are you throwing these things away?" She's like, "No, I'm never wearing these again. They're terrible." I'm like,
Well,
"I thought they were great."
Sabotage. A sabot was actually is a Dutch wooden shoe. That's that wooden shoe. Basically, the precursor to the clog was that carved wooden shoe.
Mhm.
And to sabotage was to actually like work as if you were wearing wooden shoes to slow down the process, which was actually like a whole movement around sort of, ruining an industrial complex and sort of rebelling against the system. You would work just very slowly. And that was like to work as if you were wearing wooden shoes, which explains my blazing speed today. I was still wearing the wooden shoes.
I will credit you with that little bit of tidbit knowledge, but I'm going to use that extensively.
Oh, for sure. Sabotage.
Sabotage.
What are you wearing wooden shoes?
Speaking
So
of
deep.
sabotage, and this is going to be an awkward transition, but we are here to talk about Built to Move. And it's almost like we've been sabotaging ourselves with chairs and life and phones and all this stuff that we've been talking about for many, many years. I want to jump in. I mean, I did not get to read the book cover to cover, but pretty damn close. And I'm pretty excited to talk about it.
Same here.
Yeah. Let's just start with we all are living in a world where we obsess about food and performance, and we've gotten really good. We argue about, is this hip extension or are we extending the hip? And we have these really what are known as artifacts of scholarship conversations. And yet we seem to have left everyone behind, because if we look at ACL injury rates or substance abuse or diabetes or obesity,
Depression,
social isolation, we're like, choose something you give a rat's ass about. And let's just say how our $1 trillion fitness industry experiment is running on society. And it turns out we're not. We have
Not that
completely
well.
walled ourselves off and left everyone behind.
One of the words that jumped out to me that you utilize is rewild your body.
What do you think that means to you?
Well,
Whenever I think about rewild, I really go back to Art Devaney's ancestral fitness piece.
I was just going to say getting some sunlight in my backyard, bear down to my feet, and full body natural sunlight.
That's not the sunning of the privates that people keep asking me about, do they?
I said full body, John.
Okay, all right. It was amazing. I remember I read Art Devaney's ancestral fitness deal, and this is 20 plus years ago, and that idea of like get out into nature. I mean, the things he was talking about in that original piece seem to be coming to fruition today.
Yeah, it's just basic stuff. It's get sunlight on your body, walk around, interact with your community, eat a few vegetables, right? Like it's really a lot of basic stuff. It's the same stuff that they have found that everybody does in the blue zones.
Mhm.
And they aren't doing it in formal ways, right? It's just built into their life, right? Nobody in the blue zone is like putting on their running shoes and going to an Orange Theory class, right? Like they've just figured out how to be outside and incorporate tons of movement into their day. And, they carry heavy things and, they eat some protein and vegetables. Like it's pretty simple what they're doing in those zones. And it's all just incorporated into their life. It's not some kind of like we've really formalized like we've made everyone think that everything, the only way to be healthy is to do a bunch of formal things,
like 1 hour blocks.
like meal prepping and 1 hour blocks and going to the gym for an hour and taking your 1 hour yoga class, right? Like we've told everyone all this has to be formal and that's what health means.
It doesn't stack. It doesn't aggregate.
Turns out that that doesn't work for anybody, especially not people who aren't health enthusiasts and or don't have a ton of free time.
Have you guys traveled to any of the blue zones?
I mean,
Yes.
we have, yeah.
Yeah. This summer we went to Costa Rica on that, on the peninsula. What is it? The guy, I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah. I've been there too.
Yeah. So we went to like Santa Teresa Beach and like Manzanillo and that whole deal. We were there for like 10 days. And like not only was the food incredible, like everywhere we went, like this, like like I judge things based upon like steaks. I know. So other people probably judging on vegetables, but it was like the food was amazing. The beaches were killer. Like the fact that you could go out and surf and body surf, and it was pretty amazing, especially when you see how people were living and just like interacting. And I remember leaving there and being like, I could live in this place.
Yeah.
You and I talk a lot when we are offline about some of the athletes and the processes we witness when we're asked to come in and help. And one of the things that shows up all the time is there are sort of big blind spots in athletes' performance. They think they're out training everyone. The reality is you can't out train anyone anymore. What you can only you can do is recover or adapt better than they can over the long haul. Better tactics and genetics, but the notion that you can outwork someone has sailed. And one of the things that you and I we always stumble part is these like huge holes. We're like, what do you mean you don't sleep? Or, we were working with a CrossFit Games champion who's having this occult knee pain that no one could wrap their heads around. And we started diving down into the rest of it. And it turns out when she traveled, she didn't feel safe in the hotel room or wherever she was staying. So she would leave the TV on all night just to keep her company. And somehow that TV just blasting in her room was affecting her recovery scores and her deep sleep. And all she did was turn the TV off, and lo and behold, her knee got better. And how many times you and I talked about nutrition with people, and it's what Built to Move originally started was these are the small hinges that we felt like moved the biggest doors in people's lives and performance, and that they were we all have been in universities, we work with Olympians, we work with the military. This is the blueprint off of which elite performance is built. That's the first and foremost aspect of this thing, is that we want to uncover people's blind spots. So if you're an athlete, or you fancy yourself an athlete or train like an athlete, we're like, get 10 out of 10. I guarantee you it'll improve your ability to adapt to the training you're doing and improve your quality of life with your neighbors. But then also apply these same 10 rules to your kids and see how well you're doing.
Well,
it's shocking.
The other sort of lens with which we wrote this book is like we obviously are we spend part of our life around people who are enthusiastic and nerd out about all the things that we nerd out about when we have dinner at your house, right? But we also, because we have kids and live in this like suburban neighborhood, we've become friends with a lot of people who aren't enthusiasts about health in the same way we are. But what they do share is they actually do want to be healthy and feel good in their body. And, the messages that they've gotten from the fitness business about like shredded abs and, all these things that
win your health,
like they actually don't care about those things. They want to be out of pain. They want to feel not gross and good in their body. Like they want to be able to move around doing whatever it is they do. And, so they do actually care about their health, but not in the same way we do. And they're totally confused. We've just fire hosed them with like all this super optimized, tactical, crazy things that they can't relate to, can't figure out how to fit into their life. They definitely do not have motivation because they're burnt and raising kids
and feel terrible
feel terrible. And so we sort of said, hey, like, how can we point out all the blind spots we see in our athletic health enthusiast population, and also like bring all these other people along for the ride a little bit.
Is it, Like we constantly look at segmenting this market, and like I kind of treat everybody like an athlete. I think everybody, if they're doing something like even that looks like moving, looks like walking, or doing something athletic, being able to fix that narrative for a lot of people where they don't view themselves as athletes. Oh, that's just what athletes do. I mean, even coming down to a protein discussion with one of the moms at the barn, and she, her being like, oh, I read an article that people should be eating more protein, and I asked her how much protein to eat. She's like, I don't know, I've never measured. I was like, well, just on a gauge, how much do you eat? She's like, well, I probably had this much chicken breast. I was like, when? She's like, well, yesterday. Do I need to eat protein every single day? And like, I'm over here telling people they need to have 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and this lady told me she ate maybe 4 or 5 ounces of chicken yesterday, and wasn't actually under the impression that you probably need to eat some form of protein every day, and that's how you should base your meals. And then when I explained that to her, she's like, well, I'm not an athlete.
Yeah, so why would I have to do that? Yeah, right. And we say, I mean, we are totally on the.
Or we're like, oh, you're right, you get 0.8 grams.
Right. And so, our recommendation in Built to Move is like 0.7 to 1 gram.
If you're really sedentary, 0.7.
Yeah. Like if you're a sedentary person, fine, you can win the 0.7. But I mean, if you are, moving your body, if you're getting older, like we are, and you are, if you're recovering from surgery or an injury, or growing. If you're a growing kid,
you want to change your body composition.
Yeah. Like if you want to feel good and avoid eating a bunch of junk food because you're full.
Oh,
I mean,
keep coming.
Let's keep going on all the reasons why, but it is really interesting. And I think especially hard to sell that idea to women, because there's just so many misperceptions around that, and what that's going to do to their bodies, and a lot of fear around, I don't know, becoming too muscular or whatever. I don't really know what the psyche is around that.
That's my most favorite one, is when people are like, oh, I can't. I mean, if I even look at a weight, I'm going to pack on muscle. And I'm telling them, like, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I secretly hope to have what you have. I hope I just look at a weight and pack on muscle, because I'm yet to ever see it.
What do we say in the gym for over a decade? Well, when you start getting too big, just let us know and we'll change your programming. When you start feeling like your hamstrings are just too big, just let me know.
Yeah.
We'll just dial back the strength training. Okay. Sounds good.
I did, by the way, though, just as an aside, had a doctor's appointment recently, and my doc, I mean, this is how much work we have to do, just all of us here in this room. Because, she's like, sort of fit, runs, like she's
she's not fit, she runs,
whatever, she runs. But she actually said to me, upon seeing like my muscular shoulders and like upper back, said to me, do you think you exercise too much? And I was like, oh man, like,
she's so lucky I wasn't in the room.
Like, I was like, wow, like you have a population in here of people who are like barely making it, they're obese and diabetic, and I mean, what are we even talking about?
Just define that for me. Should I meet the recommended, RDA from the CDC about just moving my body? Oh, I do that. Is that too much? Like what do you even mean, lady?
Well,
like,
and also, again, having zero background on what my whole athletic background is, and knowing that I've been, doing upper body strength sports since I was 14 years old, that might be some important context.
Champion.
But isn't that crazy though?
She's like, you didn't row a cow, did you? And you're like, as a matter of fact, I did. That explains everything.
As a matter of fact, I did. I feel so relaxed, by the way, about, anytime John and I are together and we can just like wax poetic about Cal and all things Cal. And I can make like obscure references to Cal. John's in on it.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, you know what it is. It's just,
I have this hat.
It's kind of like just like you just have like a coffee and then you got a really nice Americano. It's the same, but a little step up.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I'm spending I just got pulled in. I'm having a lot more conversations with the whole athletic department, and the sports med department is starting to work with the whole school, which is very fun.
Nice.
And we did go to a water polo game over there at Speaker the other day. It was really fun. And as is my usual ritual, and you may have seen on Instagram, every time I go there, I get some yogurt park. And every time I eat it, I feel sick afterwards, actually.
Well, as is tradition.
That doesn't stop me. It's like a disease.
Yeah, no, Yogurt Park. I was trying to explain to my kids. Do you remember the donut shop as you're coming out of like Henry's and like walking down that donut shop that was in the food court? They used to sell donut holes at like 2 a.m. and drunk girls, they just write 5 on it, would like give 5 and then just see these donut holes just getting smashed. And I was trying to explain it to my daughters. They were like, well, wait a minute, why would they be eating donut holes at 2 a.m? I'm like, well, they had a bunch of drinks and they were hungry, and you lose inhibition, so they're crushing donut holes. And Jamie's like, I wouldn't need to have a drink to be able to eat donut holes. I'm like, okay. You're also like I was trying to go through the thought process. I'm like, I'll just leave it here. Yeah, I'm excited to go visit you guys at college.
You're like, I'll be unable to explain this.
So I'm hanging out with a lot of college athletes these days, which is amazing to see how the whole process has become so much more sophisticated on so many levels. And simultaneously, working with 19 and 20-year-olds and trying to understand motivations. And it's very interesting to see kind of beliefs. But one of the things, especially since Georgia is, spinning up to go to college, do you guys know, have you heard of the Borg? Do you know what the Borg is?
Yeah, from Star Trek.
Nope. It's called a blackout rage gallon. And what you do so you don't get roofied and you control the amount of drinking is you got a gallon of water and you pour out as much as you want, like a half. You add as much alcohol as you're going to drink that night. So like 6 shots of vodka, whatever you're doing. Then you add a bunch of flavor like Stio and 2 packs of electrolytes from Element. I swear. And then you write your name on it. So like George's would be like James Borg for whatever reason. And you then walk around with your Borg all night long. You don't get roofied. It has a cap on it. And that is now a thing. You guys were just glad to have like Natty Ice light beer that you could get your hands on.
I was trying to get roofied everywhere I went. I just never got roofied.
The thing is like a girl dad now. John is going to feel disturbed. Like once you hear that, you're like, okay, that's
blackout
kind of awesome.
Gallon.
Like the Borg is kind of awesome, and then you're like, like as a girl parent.
We used to call that riot punch, but it was just Everclear.
We used to call it jungle juice.
Yeah. Jungle juice is what we called it.
We would steal the Gatorade containers from the football training room.
Yeah.
And then they had Gatorade and powdered Gatorade. We would steal that and we would mix it with like anything we could buy. It was like this just nasty. It was
Tang.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
So, interestingly about Cal working, because we, we obviously throw quite a bit of shade on our own industry in terms of like, not casting a wide net and leaving people behind. But it is interesting, especially to watch Kelly now working with the Cal women's water polo team and see how many, thanks to all of the sort of advancements we've made in this industry and the availability of information and, a whole host of things, like to see how sophisticated they are compared to like what I was doing when I was at Cal as a rower. And I imagine what you were doing as a football player in terms of like, I was following a low-fat diet, was a vegetarian for a while. I'm pretty sure I didn't eat any protein for like 2 years while I was a rower at Cal. I mean, that's just one of like 1,000 sort of ways in which we just didn't know back then. And so it's really cool to see all the ways in which at that level, there's been so many cool innovations and what's available to kids in terms of like optimizing performance and just being better is out there. That's a positive.
Is it technology based? I mean, I remember when I heard that actually they offer training table to the athletes all year round. We only got it on the nights we practiced during the season. And then other than that, they were like, fuck off. So now they have like training table all year round. Like, our scholarship checks were $740 and your rent was $475. And I think my parents kicked me an extra $300. And at the beginning of the month, we'd go to Costco and I'd buy everything I could. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I'm 4 minus eggs. I'm not going to make it to the end of the month. And like, you're like literally like strategically trying to get to the end of the month and being like, oh man, I can't overeat anything. And like, it's so crazy. You're asking these
athletes can get a meal right after practice, and have access to shakes and bars.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see in tournaments, for example, now we've basically made it so that the women get out and they're handed a bar and a shake right away while they're still wet. So we're starting to just eliminate some of the slack out of the system. And it's something you brought up, the way just conceptually you think of everyone is an athlete if you're training, moving your body. And, I think some people will be like, you don't compete, whatever. But if we carry that a little bit further, I think there is something notable here that so much of what we've come to understand about ourselves kind of as a system, as a culture, has come out of sport. Mm-hmm. This revolution in whole food. I mean, tell me paleo takes off in America without athletes. It doesn't. tell me HRV takes off in America. Now everyone's got an Oura Ring or a Whoop, but that's Joel Jameson. That is, the kids at Omega Wave kind of beating this drum around performance. And I think there's a lot of technology that's come out of Formula One racing that ends up in cars. And the same thing is happening. And so we are always looking at, well, what are the sort of through line narratives here? Or what are the kind of big stones that allow us to regress and progress basic behaviors? And, I think you brought it up with that woman is a great example of her. Like, this is what we know because we've been testing it in the laboratory of sports performance and athletic performance so that we can actually try to transmute those lessons into, changing and improving our society or remedying our own family and households. I think that's a really insightful, and even just the use of the word athlete there is important because it actually does connect sport and performance to actually the things we're coming to learn. And, the rewilding is, these are basics in here, but people don't appreciate, or they're seeing so much change in their environments and in their day-to-day life that they've just been dragged away and they don't even know that they have these blind spots.
And with an athlete, they're also searching for that 1% or that 0.1% increase in performance. And then with your 10 it's a new word for me, rewild approaches, these 10 vital signs, I feel Gen Pop is going to see 5-10% increases rather than just that 1.1 a pro athlete would.
Yeah. And one of the things we really wanted to do was make these, easy to assess, but decidedly objective measures that anyone can test and keep an eye on.
Like, it's not feel good. Like,
it's like, go
objective.
test, like, tell us who's 10 out of 10. Right. And my guess is that maybe some athletes that we know are going to get closer to 10 out of 10, but no one's going to get 10 out of 10. And, but, Kelly had a physical therapist friend that said, hey, why is it like people go to the dentist twice a year? Like, why is it that we aren't set up as a culture to go to the physical therapist twice a year? And sort of like, I guess some people go and get a physical, but what you get measured at your physical is your weight and your blood pressure. And those are the only vital signs, right? But we all know that, the things in this book, these 10 things are also vital signs. And if people actually have a way to objectively, measure and manage those things, that it can be really transformative, that people don't need to go to the physical therapist twice a year. You can, just keep an eye on these things. And if you aren't getting a green or a yellow on any of these tests, it's just like, it's some information and something you need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, 120 over 80 isn't great blood pressure, but it's not bad blood pressure. It means, hey, we should pay attention to this. But giving people a benchmark is the key.
With the college athletes, and especially the water polo players and the different athletes, like, what's the low hanging fruit? I always kind of worried a little bit with the HRV stuff, that I didn't want to take it, especially when we started kind of looking at it. Like, I got nervous. Like, what if I showed up on game day and I was all red? So I kind of got away from it a little bit just because I didn't want that kind of psychological crutch. Like, oh man, I didn't feel good. Like, my HRV was bad. So I wonder, like, there's probably a proper dose and a place for it, but like, what's the low hanging fruit? What's the easy stuff? We talk about sleep, we talk about nutrition, understanding nutrient timing, maybe managing volume. All of these things go into play, but then there's this huge technology piece where these kids are so plugged in on technology with everything from like apps to monitor their food, and they got heart rate variability, and you got this and this and this, and
it's interesting. I don't know if I've witnessed any of the athletes sort of engage in the tech or HRV. I don't think anyone's wearing a Whoop band. No one is. And you bring up a really, I think, a salient point that these things are lagging indicator data points that tell me about what I was supposed to do. Right. So, hey, I drank too much coffee. I stayed up too late. I'm jet lagged from my weekend. I'm under recovered. My nutrition's been off. We were just counseling an athlete who's in the middle of a World Cup tour and was feeling really jet lagged from massive and getting terrible recovery data on his Whoop. And I was like, you need to take that thing off. I'm like, don't look at it again. I'm like, it's going to tell you exactly what we know, which is you're sleep deprived and trying to get it, and you have to compete. And so,
like, what's he going to do? Not do his competition?
And let me tell a story about working with a local superstar athlete named Kate Courtney, who is a world champion, overall World Cup Olympian mountain biker, and just a superstar, one of the most complete athletes I've ever met, just so dialed in, just a superstar. And the morning of a world championship, she has to win this race to win the overall. And she basically looks at her whoop and it says like red. And she's like, well, that's wrong. I feel good to go. And she's like, it must be wrong. So she's like, it's wrong. So she goes out and wins and then calls up Whoop. And I was like, hey, your data's wrong. And they were like, no, it's not. And she was like, yeah, go ahead and check it out because I won and I'm telling you it's wrong. And she was right.
Yeah.
Imagine getting that information from your device telling you how to feel. And versus also, hey, this mindset of what can I control today? I'm still a rad human being. I still know how to be a baller and show up and go hard in the paint. And when the time comes, I can, shoot my guns when it's time to fire. But simultaneously, I just control what I can control. And I think as adults, so as Juliet pointed out earlier, it's so easy to be like, well, it's all or nothing. I had chicken yesterday. I had some beers, so let's eat some pizza. And I don't feel good today. Versus every single day, we can almost play this game where we get to reset and do better and expand this idea of physical practice to include things like walking and include things like, sleeping and sort of like looking at the whole spectrum, not just my training or performance. And so really, what can I control? How in my means, and then specifically where in my day can I control that? And then you rinse, wash, repeat that for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. And lo and behold, you really start to outstrip those people who don't do that.
Yeah. And, my view on the whole technology thing, and, Kelly, by the way, he actually does. He's really enjoyed wearing an Oura ring lately, but he hates all this
Only for the
technology
sleep
stuff.
in the morning.
He has no interest. And I, on the other hand, have had like every device, every iteration. I love tracking stuff and looking at data. But if I really pull back from that, the only 2 things that it really has been useful for me for is the sleep piece. And I'm not even sure it's necessarily useful on an ongoing basis. I think once you get some initial data and, learn things like you need to be in bed for a whole hour longer than the amount of sleep you're trying to get, some simple things like that. I don't know that it's that useful. And I'm not sure that I'm making a lot of tweaks on a day-to-day basis based on my sleep score, but still, the most important thing in my view is being able to see your overall step count and see if you've moved enough in the day, and that's like 1960s pedometer technology, right? Like I think a lot of the stuff is cool and I enjoy it. Like as a nerd, I think it's fun to play around with this and see my data. And
well, what gets measured gets managed.
But I mean, honestly, in the end, like if people actually can just use these tools to track their overall movement, not just their 1 hour workout, but their overall daily movement. Like that's to me, the most useful thing they do.
Well,
still at this point.
There's a cool piece of research. It's based on NEAT, which is non-essential
non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
That's what it is. And they found that people that fidget and move, like my wife, for example, never sits down. She's like the Energizer Bunny. Just like those people can burn up to 30% more calories just by fidgeting. And
30,
like,
and
like
that's so many cookies.
Yeah. And people really think that like that's the missing piece of overall lifetime weight control. And that's apart from exercise, right? Like if somebody exercises an hour a day.
Ozempic is missing.
Oh, yeah. Kelly and I are obsessed with Ozempic, by the way. So we should have a segment on that.
Oh, are you guys taking it?
No, but we're like weirdly obsessed with it.
What if I could get down to 220, lose a whole bunch of muscle and just be light for a minute?
Like now when we watch any TV show, we're like, who on this TV show has Ozempic face? Because definitely some of them do.
I'm lost.
What
are we talking about?
So it's a new drug that came out. Actually, and the only reason I know anything about it, I was on a podcast and Doc Parsley dug into the research on it. And he's like, it's got some really interesting stuff for, I think it resets leptin and ghrelin and then does something with the beta cells. But I think really what it does is it just makes people feel sick so they don't want to eat. Which is pretty much as he was going through all these positives. He's like, yeah, but people have problems with nausea. I'm like, oh, so you just make people sick to their stomach and they won't eat? That seems like a great way to get.
Yeah. Like great idea. Well, and the, by the way, it was developed, it was developed for, diabetics and like, super morbidly obese people and probably has a pretty great use for that. Yeah. But, all these like Hollywood people and fancy people have like decided it's like the next great weight loss drug. But apparently the data also shows that you don't just burn fat that you actually, it burns off like your lean muscle mass as well,
Yeah.
which is like not great at all.
No,
Like
Especially for
that's
these
a
adults
high
cruising
cost.
into there. I mean, look, one of the things we try to do in this book is say, if you haven't gotten the message that you need to like be under some resistance training, come on, like that message is out there. You've heard that. So that can't be the only thing here. You're right. And ultimately, yes, we believe, and we even talk, with Dave Spitz in the back of the book, his idea of never do nothing. But, ultimately we'd love to shift this narrative around, most of the reason people get interested in fitness or in nutrition is to change their body composition. And it's probably not even that, it's to lose weight for them, whatever that means.
Or
So,
gain weight. I mean, that's why we started lifting weights.
That's right.
I was skinny and I wanted to be big. Yeah.
But how can you carry as much muscle into your back half of your life? That is the game. If we're seeing that, bone density, I mean, there was just an article in the New York Times, 2 days ago, that they're expecting hip fractures to double by 2050 in this country. Just think about that.
Right.
And the data is that, man, if you break your hip, chance of you dying within the next 5 years is like immense.
Yeah, because you're immobilized. I mean, the greatest determining factor for longevity is muscle mass. The interesting one I saw the other day, and I'm going to butcher this one. If you're over the age of 40, exercise 4 times a week, and when you look down, you can actually see your belt buckle unabated by your stomach. You're like in the 0.01% of the population in this country.
0.01.
Yeah, 0.01.
Wow.
So I think when I talked to Rob Wolf about this recently, and as you know, Rob is a big kind of end of the world's coming, like, let's get some statistics. And so if I ever really want to get spun up, I just give Robbie a call and like, give me some statistics.
He's the master of this.
He's the master of it. And his contention based upon the numbers, if like, let's say there was like a massive EMP and all technology was gone, wiped off the planet, they think there'd probably be between 90 and 93% attrition of this country within 1 year. Because you wouldn't be able to get drugs, you wouldn't be able to, basically everything, you'd almost have to go back to the Stone Age. And because of, I think it was all cause mortality, dependence on drugs, lack of the ability to be able to go out and find food, they think about a year to shed about 90%, which is roughly 300 million people would be shed in 1 year. So that was, he thought that less than 7% of the population was healthy enough to be able to pivot their lifestyle into something that required some form of daily work.
It really says that if we add complexity, I mean, we know this, if you add complexity to unstable systems, when people come in, we're like, let's learn to Olympic lift today. We're like, maybe we should start with air squats or barbell squats, or, like we need to do some things first before we start adding in the secret school program. And I mean, you really bring up the just excellent point that we don't know what first principles are, and more importantly, where and who is responsible for this. Is it the United States? Is that the person who is going to overlay these best principles? Is it the state? Is it your city? It really has come to what we think is this hyperlocal phenomenon, and hyperlocal means your community, and even closer than that, it's your garage and your household and your neighbors. This is the functional order and the functional unit where we can actually see real change, where one person can become a node and influence just the immediate people around it. And, all 4 of us have worked at the governmental organization level of like the Army. We know that we have to be having these conversations from the top down, but you also know how difficult that is unless you have some command structure. It just doesn't work. And frankly, I wouldn't want the government to try to keep telling me what I could eat. And, but we really have to start this from the bottom up. And otherwise, like you say, something is going to happen, like a fungus, which is out there, and it's going to wipe us out. I mean, really is. We're seeing how that this is really a competitive advantage as much as it's about survivability. So much of the people we talk to, they think that they're maxed out. They think that they can't work any harder and they're super smoked. And we're like, actually, all the things that you're doing to adapt to that stress are crap. And you could actually work harder and still feel better for your family at the end of the day. Or adapt to the training stimulus and be fresher day after day after day.
Is it
Well, I
because the
think-
confusing message? I mean, we're in such a
Gotta be.
the level, and this is what I also get a little nervous of. Like, I think we live in this interesting echo chamber where, yeah, it makes sense to us, but then all of a sudden you like deviate outside your echo chamber and you start interacting with some other people. Like, I took Cash to baseball, and I'm sitting there talking to a bunch of other, 40 something dads with their kids, and they started asking me questions or, rapping about this. And it's amazing to be like, wow, like this, like we almost need to have like a weekly nutrition training talk where like, hey, I'm going to be here and like, let's do, pump like a stump deal where I'll stand on a stump and be like, you need to count your protein. Like, if you can lift weights, count your protein and count your steps. I'm pretty much sure that your chance for longevity is dramatically higher.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's that. I do think we are in we're in a massive echo chamber in our space, and we think that.
Yeah, we all own that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we all need to own that better, and I think also, again, back to what I said before, I do think we haven't told people that these are things that they can incorporate into a time crunched life where, you can actually fit these things into, a life where you go to an office and commute and raise kids and spend your weekends at sports practices. Like, we haven't told anyone that A, it's possible, and B, how to do that, which is one of the things we're trying to do in this book, is teach people that, again, these health behaviors do not have to be formal. They don't require willpower or motivation, that they're just all these ways you can build them into the thing you're doing. Like, I'm obsessed with this. I spend half my weekends at water polo tournaments, and it's been super cool to see. Like, I'm obsessed with the fact that when you have a kid who's a youth athlete, all you do is wait around a lot. And man, like, if we just got all parents to go walk around while you're waiting for your kid to get going, like, that alone would be huge. And it's really cool. Like, I have all these friends now who send me photos on the weekends while they're stuck at their kids' practice and they're at some random high school and they're on a track and they're just walking around because they're waiting for an hour for their kids' game to start, right? How about that versus just sitting in the lawn chair? But that's just a thing that nobody's ever suggested that actually might move the needle for people in terms of their health.
Yeah. What?
I think we should get them some vital signs.
Yeah.
Them tests. What's cool is 10 vital signs, and you give people a self-assessment. So let's explore that a little bit. And my question is going to be with the order of operations here. Is that intentional? Is this due to number one's the most important? And what is number one for our
No
audience?
aspect of your body, no body system works alone. And so one of the things I think people get confused about is they're like, Matt Walker or sleep. Yeah, we're like, yes, 100%. And walking and nutrition. And like, which one of these things, which one of your fingers do you think you don't want? I mean, that's really, the great conversation that fires me up is when people were like, Kelly, what's the one mobilization I need to do?
Oh, it's like the greatest thing, you guys. Like, you can see actually like red starts filling up his face.
I thought it
and
was
his,
the unhinging of the jaw so you can swallow more food.
Yeah.
At
And
once.
his head starts like twitching to the side a little bit. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt Kelly, but you can go out and get a whole book on any one of these chapters, right? A whole book.
There was also a YouTube series that I've been in that Kelly had, which was called Mobwad.
Yeah, we tried.
Oh yeah, you tried. It was like, yeah, we did them. And which one's the most important? All of them.
Which one is-
Go. All of them. Just so everyone knows, John had a nightmare once and he called me up afterwards. He's like, Kelly, I had this nightmare where you're like still making videos about the body part like 10 years later. And you're like, on today's mobility wad, we're going to talk about this muscle in your finger. And I'm literally like, I have done that video in the last month. And I'm like, John, saw the future.
John's nightmare has come
I
true.
took a pencil and I was like, let's get into interosseous. We, when we laid this thing out, what we wanted to do was get people's attention right away. And the easiest thing to confront people, because look, I feel good. We're full guy. I took this ibuprofen and this bourbon and this THC, and I had my 17 coffees and I'm sitting and like, that's fine. And so what we wanted to do is open up this idea with a really central idea, which is if you're saving for retirement, you basically like, I want to retire on this day. I need to have this much money. You work backwards. You start saving that much money every month. I mean, that's literally how it works. Or if you want, hey, I'm going to train up for an NFL world championship. Great. that's on this day. We have this many practices. These are the things we got to cover. This is how we work in sports. We just work backwards. I want to put 100 pounds on my
Like,
deadlift.
not just in sports, like people do this for business goals and personal goals. Like this is like we operate, and it is a form of delayed gratification. But it, anyway, go ahead.
No, that's it. That's it. So immediately we took this number one reason why people end up in nursing homes is they can't get up and down off the ground. And it's an excellent, well-validated study that shows that if you struggle to get up and down up off the ground without using your hands, then you're going to more increase for all-cause mortality and increase morbidity. And really, more importantly for us and the work we've been doing for so long is it says about how fluently and effortlessly you can move through your environment, right? Like, yes, nutrition is vitally important to take care of the tissues and gut and the rest of it. But the thing is the thing, which is moving through the world and expressing yourself fluently and efficiently in the way you want to in the world. And when we ask people to sit down, crisscross applesauce, and stand back up, that is so dumb and so easy. And it blows people's minds that they cannot get up off the ground without using their hands.
In my notes, I wrote standing, arrow, crisscross applesauce, seated.
Crisscross.
Like, so literally in my notes,
applesauce.
it's crisscross applesauce.
Crisscross applesauce. Yeah.
Yeah. We felt like it was an attention getter, right? Because you asked earlier about like, what's the low hanging fruit for athletes and everybody. And, we do have a lot of behavioral chapters in this book about nutrition and sleep and walking, but, a lot of people still, even though we've been beating this drum now for 15 years, don't understand the connection between doing a little, love and care and input on your body and just being able to feel better and be able to do the things you want to do physically. Like that message still is definitely not widely understood, and even not greatly understood in our, in those who describe themselves as athletes. One of the things that Kelly and I have talked a lot about lately is trying to sort of like redefine what mobility means for people, because it's one of those words that, Kelly popularized it and in the athletic space. But I think it's, if you ask 20 different, people at a gym what it means, you'd get 20 different definitions. And, in the old days, the supple leopard days, to Kelly, mobility was like, do you have the range of motion and then the motor control to do the
native range of motion?
Native range
the
of motion.
Same range of motion every doctor, every orthopedic surgeon, everyone says you should have. You're a human being, your shoulder goes up this much.
But, now we're sort of like, hey, let's again cast a wider net here and say, mobility is the ability to move freely through your environment without pain and be able to do the things you want to do physically. And, when you ask anyone what they want to be able to, what they would like as an aging and getting older person, they want two things. They want to be able to move and do what they want to do physically, and they want to keep their mental acuity. Those are universal, regardless of whether you describe yourself as an athlete or not. Those are the two things everybody agrees on.
And did you know that they're related?
Yeah, oh my God. And back to the goals thing. Look, like Kelly and I have our goals are we want to be able to ski and mountain bike when we're 80. But, to anyone listening to this, like, what are your physical goals? Because everybody has them. And I can tell you, no one's physical goal is to be in a skilled nursing facility being taken care of by their adult children. That's no one's physical goal. No. Right. But in order to, be able to reach those goals, again, working backwards, you got to do a little care and feeding of the body in the form of,
reclaiming
your
native ranges and native abilities.
Keeping an eye on your range of motion, making sure you're, trying to undo all the sitting.
That test is fair. You don't even have to have full hip flexion or be very strong to do it.
You know how stiff I am, John, and I can do that test. Yeah. I'm stiff.
Well, the in jiu-jitsu, we constantly like how different creative ways to get off the ground from different positions without using your hands is something that we do all the time. I mean, so the doctor that I told you guys about some of the neuro stuff that the testing I had when I got a chance to rap with the doctor, I'm like, what would you think like the greatest determining factor would be for longevity and health and avoiding some of these neurological dysfunction? And he's like, insulin sensitivity. And greater insulin sensitivity comes with more muscle mass in relation to fat, so greater metabolic flexibility. So he's like, the more muscle you can carry in relation to fat translates into greater insulin sensitivity, which is probably the greatest determining factor we have for starving off things like dementia and Alzheimer's and other factors. And as he was saying it to me, I'm like, it's almost like I planted this in your mind and you're telling me exactly stuff that I've been regurgitating because we've been saying this exactly for so long. But it's great to hear like actually a doctor that tests people's brains and is trying to make people, and he's like, we can do all this balance. We got all these magnets, but like if people just start exercising and getting healthier and actually losing body fat and gaining muscle, instantly their brains just tend to grow and become much more dynamic.
And I think you make such a good point. And, Kelly was talking about giving me the story about your, recent revisiting of all your brain health stuff. And I think it's such a good example of the fact that it's not too late and you can always make change. I mean, I think that's, the other thing people think, well, man, it's too late. I can't reclaim my range of motion, or it's too late. I can't reclaim my brain function, or whatever it is that people are grappling with, that, you actually can start later and actually make a difference and make change, and especially if you have some basic information, right? And so what we're trying to say, especially with these, movement chapters in our book is, hey, you get a piece of information like you did years ago about your brain. And then there's actually a lot of things you can do to improve that over time. And you'll be able to see those
consistently over 10 years. You've been doing the same thing.
Yeah. Like you've been doing these same 10 things and like it worked. It's crazy.
And to expand that, at what age do you stop healing? You don't, you heal slower because you're older, theoretically, right? It's harder to put on muscle mass. It's harder to reverse bone density, but the system responds forever until you die. And I think that's one of the things that is the issue, is that as people get so far down a pathway with a body that's so durable and so tolerant of just poor care and feeding, real stress on the system, insulin, just, hey, I just eat like crap all the time. I don't pay attention. I don't eat fiber. I don't get protein. I don't sleep. I eat drink, all those things. It's not until we get some real, engine warning lights on that people start to change. I remember being a young physio in the surgery room watching this guy get these coronary artery bypass grafts, right? He is this guy in San Francisco. I see his wife and family. They're beautiful behind me. And they are just like, he has the most beautiful family, 3 daughters, smoking hot wife. He's an attorney. He's rich. And he weighs 300 pounds and he's getting these 3 or 4 stents put into his heart. And I remember thinking, man, that guy has everything to live for, has all the resources, and still can't make these changes. Like, what does that say about how difficult it is to sort of be heroic when what we really need to do is configure the environment so that we're constrained to do the right thing without having to think about it?
Let's take a deep breath.
No, I
move into number 2.
The next one I have is breathing.
Yeah.
That is, I feel like, and as I was going through the book, you were talking about, Gabby and Laird Hamilton and some of the pool stuff they're doing. I feel like I can't swing a dead cat without running into somebody who is in the breathing space. We just had Brian Peters on, who's teaching breath with like heat and cold. I mean, everybody's doing it. I read, was it James Nestor's book, Breathe?
Yeah. Breathe. Great book.
Yeah. Like the nasal breathing thing. I immediately bought tape and started taping my mouth when I sleep. Like it was,
Same with us.
It's, I actually just bought Tex the book. I'm like, have you read it? And I just sent it to him as Tex's birthday was yesterday. So I got him that as another birthday gift.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. But I read it and like there was so much information in there. And I'm like, well, this feels like really low hanging fruit. I can tape my mouth. And if I can reap these benefits.
Right. Or just be conscious of making sure my mouth is closed during the day while I'm at work or whatever. Just like those, to me, those were like the 2 biggest takeaways from that book. Like, keep your mouth closed. Maybe just one big takeaway. Like breathe with your mouth closed.
And now when I'm around people, like I see people with their mouth open, just like mouth breathers. And you're like, it reminds me of my dog after we take him for a walk, they come on, their just mouth is open panting. And I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. I mean, one of the, problems with being married to Kelly is that
there's problems being married to me?
Is that you can't, he teaches you to not be able to unsee poor movement and especially
not poor,
in the
less effective strategies.
Whatever. In the form of like like the recreational runner is always the example. I like to say, like, there's always all these recreational runners around our neighborhood. And it's like, I mean, the amount, there, and we have some like standard people. We have like the Prancer in our neighborhood, and we have like these sort of avatars of runners. But, but anyway, I lost my train of thought
the
there.
one that I owe to Kelly is the PPT, the piss poor tissue.
PPT, piss poor tissue. Oh my God.
Uh,
Oh yeah, but
I
what
deal
else?
with, I like everywhere I go, like if I like, you meet people or you like touch on like this or like I'm like, ooh, PPT.
Piss poor PPT.
Yeah. And
But yeah.
I got that from Kelly.
Yeah, but the connection to Kelly and recreational runners and James Nestor, though, is that you read that book and you can't unsee all the mouth breathers. Like it's sort of like a curse. You read that and you're like, oh, you're at your kid's game and you're like evaluating all the parents on the stands with you and like, oh, look at that mouth breather. Like he's definitely gonna die young,
Wow.
So
You're so morbid.
wow, it's so mean. Kelly, talk about
The glass is half full, baby, not half empty. The one of the, I think we were inundated almost a decade ago with some of this early breathing stuff, through Wim Hof to Laird and Gabby to Brian McKenzie to, then Oxygen Advantage, right? We really saw all of those things. And I think that there's been a real case for people wrapping their heads around improvements in physiology, right? That we're seeing, hey, decreases in cortisol because you're not neck breathing. You can shift substrate utilization later because you're not signaling that, you should burn sugar because you're mouth breathing. You can access more oxygen through the hemoglobin because you're CO2 tolerant, all of that. That's all cool. But for us, we really took this different tact on it. We're like, holy moly, there's a real opportunity here to talk about the mechanics of the breathing, the actual physical thing that's happening and the implications that if you want to, improve your VO2 max, let's go ahead and look at how rigid and how effective the container moves, right? If everyone's talking about like the spinal engine is a very fun thing to kind of throw, you throw Grakovetsky out there and you're flashing your knowledge of, that you need to move your spine as the first engine, but the first movement is not the spinal flexion or it's breathing. And if you come into me to see, for back pain, we're going to talk about, are you walking enough, getting non-exercise activity? Are we talking about decongesting those tissues? We're going to talk about your sleep because we can't even understand what's going on with the chronic pain as long as your brain perceives everything as a threat because you haven't slept. But we're also going to drop right into some kind of movement practice around the breathing mechanics to improve how much intra-abdominal pressure you can create, how well you can stiff and stabilize, what's the total excursion, how effectively that moves. And that really does a lot to change how people sort of begin to interact in their environment. If you're just sitting at the desk and you slouch because it feels good, I'm like, it's totally fine. In fact, most of us are so extension sensitive that sitting in flexion when we sit feels great. So that's fine. We're not worried about that. What we're worried about is, well, what's the session cost of that? So can you take a big breath in that position? No. Get into a position where you can take a bigger breath and all of a sudden you have to sit up and you organize yourself more effectively. If you're slouching again and you try to turn or rotate, it's not very effective. And if I say get into a position where you take a bigger breath, suddenly you can rotate all you want. And so what we start to see is you're making a lot of conscious or unconscious choices around the effectiveness of your physiology and how well you can move and how well you can ventilate and stabilize. Let's go ahead and just give you the tools to be able to feel that and to make different choices when the time arises. And I think that really creates this amazing opportunity then to help people understand that a stiff upper back, because you don't breathe there, also means that your neck and head function might be compromised. That may mean pain or may just mean sucky neck function, right? Your shoulders are going to suck because your neck, thoracic spine, and shoulders are a system. And if one of those systems doesn't move very well, it's really going to implicate how well that scapula moves on your body.
Well, and I think for us, this breathing chapter is the first place in the book where we can sort of introduce this idea of like stacking behaviors and also make it relatable for people who don't really care about increasing their CO2 tolerance, or at least don't understand why they should care. What we've said is like, look, nobody who's reading this book, including athletes, or very few people who are reading this book are going to go to a 1 hour breathing class. and or have time in their time crunch schedule to do a, morning routine that involves a half an hour breathing practice. Like that is not realistic for most people. And so what we've tried to say is, look, there's all these, really smart people who are talking about and prioritizing breathing, and no one's saying how everyday normal people can actually fit that into their lives in a way that can make a difference. Right. And so we're like, hey, we think you need to walk more and move more. That's a perfect time to practice nose only breathing. If you do anything extra, if you do any kind of formal exercise, practice nose only breathing while you warm up. Like that's a place to fit it into your life. And so what we're saying is, hey, look, there's some simple ways that you can improve this part of your function without having it become like the next thing. Do some T-spine mobilization in front of Netflix at night.
And you bring up a really good point that if you're going to the gym, we really want to protect that. If you go to Zumba or spin class, that's your thing. It's your identity. It's your community. Let's not, I think a lot of people abandon good behavior because it interferes with the thing they want to do. We're like, no, you got to go to this balance class for an hour. You're like, screw that. We're going to go deadlift, And it's much easier for us to say, here's where you can put all these things in and then protect the thing you want to protect. Do the thing you want to do. Look, I have strong feelings that your training is shit, but it's still your jam. So how am I going to protect get all these things in so that you can still do the thing that you think is best for you, which I believe is the best thing for you.
And I cannot put too fine a point on the fact that, people will fly from all over the country to see Kelly, as a physical therapist, and he is very talented. But it's important. It's important for people to appreciate that.
You're a fucking hack.
But you're fucking, no, but if someone comes to Kelly with chronic low back pain and the first two things he prescribes to them are breathing and actually learning how to breathe properly and walking, like, what are we even talking about here? Right? Like,
doesn't seem like good use of my time.
Yeah. Like, and maybe some like hip mobilizations, right? But those things are all so simple and shouldn't require a flight across the country to see Kelly Starrett, right? Those should be like, here's your Built to Move book sitting on your coffee table in front of your TV, and you can just do a couple things here to maybe make a difference and like get some sleep. But we haven't made it. We have not made it easy for people to conceive of how to fit this stuff into their life in a way that can work consistently.
Well, is it because most people are kind of in this all or nothing? I run into this all the time with like even the programs we put out where I have to give people license to not do 6 days a week. Well, then why do you write 6? Because it's for the same reason. If you come over to my house and we barbecue, I'm going to cook too much food. And I assume that you're an adult and you'll eat as much as you want. Like I do the same thing with programming. Like I want to give somebody something to do almost every single day. But if you get 4 days a week, that's better than not doing it at all. And feeling like, well, there's 6 days a week work. Well, then do 4. And so when I do consults, I tell people, I'm like, dude, fit it into your schedule. Believe me, if you can get like, it's like if you put a whole bunch of food in front of me, I tend to eat all of my proteins first, and then I eat my vegetables, and then I kind of work backwards. And if there's room for other stuff, you throw it in. Just get what's most important first.
Yeah. I mean, we've been kind of beating this drum for years about the 10 minutes a day. Do your mobility work for 10 minutes a day
in the evening.
But what I think people haven't thought about is the whole idea of like how important compounding is when it comes to these little health behaviors. Couple examples, right? If you do 10 minutes a day of mobility work while you're watching Netflix, which everybody is doing, you do 10 minutes a day of some input into your body, 70 minutes a week. Right. You can just keep adding that up over years and years of time. And while it seems so simple, it's just 10 minutes of rolling your calf or working on your shoulder mobility or your T-spine or something while you're doing something you're already doing, which is watching Netflix. It has this compounding value. The other example we give is we're obviously fans of standing as much as you can during the day, and not because we love standing. We don't have a value about standing versus sitting. We just find that standing is more of a gateway to movement and fidgeting. And so that's why we're fans of it, not because we are like pro standing desk for any other reason. But, I did this little simple calculator that if I just stand at work versus sit, which gives me the opportunity to, get above 1.5 metabolic equivalents and give an opportunity to move and fidget, I burn an extra 100,000 calories a year, which is like the equivalent of me running 23 marathons. Right.
That's a lot of cookies.
That's a lot of cookies. In Kelly's case, a lot of ice cream and a lot of yogurt park, that our systems that our systems
It's
can tolerate.
170,000 calories.
Right? And it's not something that has, again, required like willpower and motivation. I just come to my office and my standing desk is here. So I don't have to think about it. I just go and stand there.
So there's a food place. I took the kids downtown, and Kate, we went to dinner, I think on Saturday night, and across they have a custom ice cream cookie, like ice cream sandwiches. They have a custom ice cream sandwich place. So like
you're
the
going to need
kids
to take Kelly there.
Yeah, I know. I saw it and I was like, God, I hope Kelly and Juliet show up soon. We have to take them. But as we're like sitting outside, like trying to do it, I can see the kids. Like I was sitting here and I couldn't figure out what they were looking at. And then they were just like transfixed on that. And I'm like, you guys want to get dessert? And they're like, can we go check out that cookie place? I'm like, run over there and do some recon. Like, see if they have gluten-free. Tell me what the people are wearing in there. So Jamie comes back and she's like, they have gluten-free cookies. All of the guys are wearing like really skinny taper jeans with like large t-shirts and then like white tennis shoes. I'm like, perfect.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be
bespoke.
Good.
Do they have a mustache and an apron?
Well, like she was talking about the people waiting in line. So
I see.
Right.
A
lot of shitty tattoos. Like she kind of went through it and I'm like, okay, that sounds like our place. So we went over there, waited in line. And then we weren't I wasn't super in on like the different vernaculars. So I was trying to ask the girl like, okay, hey, like this, but I could tell she was bothered by the fact that I wasn't educated in the ice cream cookie genre the way I should be. So after like a really
peasant. Yeah,
totally. So as a really awkward pause, I just was like, can I get 3 gluten-free cookies and then some scoops of ice cream? She like does this. And then like, as I like get it and I'm going, I see like these other people have these bowls and all these this. And I'm like, was there a secret menu or am I just not up on this? And then we went out inside and I kind of like put the ice cream on and gave it to the kids. But I was like, I should have been like, I don't get out much to these places. I don't need a lot of ice cream. Like, show me what I need. And they were just, there was like they punished me a little bit, but we got what we needed. But it was pretty amazing.
I see a little trend. I mean, you are openly discriminated against the espresso shops here in
San Francisco.
I believe we have been openly discriminated against at Blue Bottle and some of these other hipster places.
You're not hipster enough, man. My jeans are not tight enough. Apparently,
the hipsters see Kelly coming and they're like, oh no.
This happened to us at Blue Bottle. Do you remember when we went in there and the guy just scoffed at me, like didn't even talk, just was like,
he wouldn't even give you.
Remember, you tried to buy all the bags of coffee and he wouldn't let you.
What about the other
customers? Oh, we tell that story so often.
I was like,
you
hey,
do not. Yeah.
He would only sell me 1 bag, and I was like, well, hey, can I get like 5 or 6 bags because I'm going back to Southern California? He's like, no. What if somebody else?
Can I get an espresso to go? No, I won't give it to you to go. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to drink it here.
You have to stand here and drink it.
He told me he wouldn't make it a to-go cup because it somehow like cheapened the experience of how he wanted to do like the leaf in the cup and the whole thing. So I had to like sit there and drink it out of the cup. And then I was like, can I get some beans to go? And he's like, you can get 1 pound. I was like, well, can I get like 5 or 10? He's like, no. What if somebody else?
That's when Blue Bottle was also in like a dirty alley in Hayes Valley too. So you had to stand there in like a dirty alley and drink your coffee there because
are you describing our CrossFit gym?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was also like a dirty alley.
All of this is, as we move in, we start to say that one of the things that we believe strongly in is expanding people's practices. How do we make their lives bigger? And you just bring up a really good point. A couple times, we prioritize fruits and vegetables in proteins first, and then there's less of an impact to these other things. So
and movement.
Right. Well, I'm just saying that in this next kind of this vital sign around or the concept is how do we expand what you're doing so there's greater tolerance in the system. But when we haven't given people benchmarks for any of these behaviors, if we did this for a bunch of world champions, we're like, we think we like this model. We try to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day. That's one of our friends, E.C. Sinkowski. It's her work in the 800-gram challenge. And what she found was there's good research to support a lot of chronic disease goes away if people eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables, whatever that means to you. 4 apples.
How much is 800 grams? Like I'm not a European, so I don't count in grams.
It's 4 large apples or medium to large size apples. And if you're eating a lot of leafy greens,
it's 1.7 pounds of fruits and vegetables,
yeah.
but a pound of cherries is 230 calories. So what we're seeing is it's not even about calorie control, which is what most people are looking for. It's about, hey, you don't even have the micronutrients, the minerals, the polyphenols, all of the good stuff that's in fruits and vegetables, plus this thing that is irrefutably good for humans called fiber. You don't get any of that. And so let's go.
Everybody knows that you just need to eat meat, and that carnivore and that fiber is a scam.
You're not wrong.
No,
Plus,
I fight this fight all the time, and I try to tell people the healthiest people on the planet eat the greatest diversity of diet of food. The people that can, that if you can only consume one macronutrient without some form of physical distress, that is a tool for an unhealthy person to become healthy. But voluntarily going and like restricting your diet into like one macronutrient of just red meat and salt and water. Like I deal with this with people constantly on this carnivore thing. I'm like, why? I heard it was healthy. Okay, well, the healthiest people on the planet eat the greatest diversity of diet, like Roy G. Biff. Like there's, that's all. I'm like, just like, and then, have you done your research? I'm like, are you referring to the YouTube video that you watched? Because I have 25 years of research through Tom Incledon doing, blood testing on everybody to support this information.
Well, and you just go back to, again, what we talked about earlier in the blue zones. Like when you look at the diet of people in the blue zones, like universally, they're eating a bunch of diverse fruits and vegetables and protein. I mean, that's just that. And that goes across every culture too. I like one of my favorite books is Kate Shanahan's book, Deep Nutrition. Yeah. And she talks about these pillars of health. And, that's like, that's like one of my top nutrition books I've ever read. And again,
did you know that book? Like we had her on our podcast and I thanked her. I was like, I read your book many, many years ago. And just the whole thing with like the Fibonacci sequence and the faces, and she was able to overlay them, all the Weston Price stuff. Like that was so impactful for me. And I thanked her. I was like, I'm a huge fan. And like, I've put so much this into practice. And she was like, oh my God, thank you. I'm like, this was great. So we had her on.
Fermented food, whole milk dairy, right? Eat diverse the rainbow,
fruits and vegetables,
diverse protein sources, even,
off the bone too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's where I got my whole predator, what I call the predator diet, where you have to eat only meat off the bone. So if it has a bone in it, you can eat it. That's like the joke.
In our family, we call it chicken on a stick.
I have to mention this other thing that was so, since we're on this nutrition tip, that was so influential to me. And we still owned a gym at this point, but one of my favorite pieces of work on nutrition is the Precision Nutrition article called "The Cost of Getting Lean." It's actually like a series of infographics, and in addition to Kate Shanahan's book, was so influential to me because and I try to post it once a year, because what you realize again among sort of everyday people is most people actually don't give a crap about having 8% body fat and shredded abs. Like
especially when,
and we've sold people this idea, or we've sold ourselves this idea in the fitness business that this is what people want. Turns out people don't want that. And talk about, like, if we're going to talk about overall health, like, you look at all these charts, it's like, we can talk about all these fitness and health metrics, but really, like, what help, one of the things that helps people live long and live happy is having, strong relationships and community around them. And the way we do that as human beings is by eating together. Mm-hmm. That's how we connect as humans.
You mean bringing my chicken breast to get my 2% abs?
Right. Like, great. So you got to bring a Ziploc bag of protein to the restaurant because you can't eat food with your friends and neighbors and you become a weirdo. Like, that is not the key to longevity. Like, what are we even talking about here? Like, those close connections and relationships in so many cases are brought together by eating and enjoying food together. And if we eliminate that as because we've become so restrictive and weird about food, like, that's a problem. And that also, people can't relate to that. Again, the moms and dads that you're seeing at the weekend soccer game or whatever sport your kid is playing, again, they don't care about having 8% body fat. They don't want to do something extreme. They want to figure out a way that they can be healthy, but without having to give up this huge piece of their community, which is eating together.
But, if you set out to people then and say, hey, look, you've got to crush 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. That means you probably need a fruit and vegetable with every meal. Mm-hmm. And you actually are going to have to be conscious about hitting your protein goals. That's you actually have to work out a little bit. You have to be more intentional. Yeah. Well, what you see is that that expands. People go on there like, oh, I'm going to have the steak and I'll have 3 vegetable sides. And now I'm at dinner with my friends and I'm not restricting. I'm not weird. That really opens up the door for normalizing a lot of these things. And look, we agree with you. I think for performance, I mean, Liver King had to take a whole bunch of glycogen powder to even train, but all of a sudden in the carnivore sphere, we're seeing that, hey, honey is back in there. Raw milk dairy starting to be back in there. We're seeing berries back in there.
Well, what's his name? Paul Saldino completely pivoted. He all of a sudden went back to something that looked a lot like the diet that Matt Lalonde talked about.
That's right.
10 plus years ago.
It was 100% the Lalonde diet.
Which looked like the most nutrient dense diet you could eat, which would be something that looked like animal-based proteins, red meat, fish, this, and then, a Roy G. Biv, like a cornucopia of different colored fruit, occasional, vegetables. The idea that vegetables are bullshit is bullshit, because if you just heat them up a little bit, all that just kind of goes by the wayside. And then, full fat raw dairy, and certain occasional organ meat, bone meat off the bone. I mean, it's literally exactly what Lalonde talked about when I was sitting in his house at 2009 or 2010 when we did the Ancestral Health Symposium. So it kind of comes full circle.
Where do you think you guys talk to so many people, like, and maybe it's just the echo chamber and we need something new to talk about and we're bored, but like, where do you guys think we sort of like lost the way here, especially from a nutrition standpoint?
So I've come to the conclusion that the farther you get out on the rails, like the more extreme something is, the easier it is for people to buy into it. Like I'm presently doing this. Like I had a guy the other day who was like, I started doing carnivore, here's all the improvements. And I'm like, could it be the fact that you just cut all of the crap out of your diet and now you're not eating this stuff?
No.
Yeah. And I try to explain it. I'm like, dude, like if you just prioritize protein and like one ingredient, the same stuff we've been talking about, Vince Gironda's Stone Age diet is the same deal. Everything that we've been preaching for all these years, you'd be so much farther along and you wouldn't have to be so regimented. But I've also come to the conclusion that the more extreme something is, the easier it is to kind of get on that boat. Like it's all or nothing. So you got the vegans on one side, you got these people on the other. I'm either going to CrossFit 2 on 1 off 6 days a week until, I can't even, see straight because I'm in such adrenal fatigue and having all these problems, or I do nothing. And I think as humans, the idea of like consistent moderation, there was a guy that talked about this quote about moving the dirt, training's like moving dirt. You move a little, some days you get a big shovel, some days you get a spoon, but like the consistency factor is next to impossible for people to wrap their heads around. I have to this is the path I'm on. I'm having all these problems. So then I deviate. I had one yesterday. A friend was like, hey, I'm going to do a 10-day water fast and only drink black coffee. And I'm going to train. And I did this a couple of years ago and my blood pressure went down. I got off, all statins and, my LDLs went down. I mean, it was talking about all these things. I'm like, could it be the fact that you just lost an amazing amount of weight in that 10 days? No, it was autophagy. I'm like, when it comes to autophagy, exercise is by far a better form of autophagy than starving. Well, and it just kind of started going into this.
What am I going to talk about on Facebook, John?
Well, I think that's
but then I'm like, if you want to do a vision quest, fucking just to say, hey, I want to do a vision quest and I'm going to go fucking not eat for 10 days.
People need to do something hard once in a while. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with it.
Right. Well, I also think one of the challenges here for all of us is all those extremes are really fun and really sexy on social media and on YouTube, right? That's fun and sexy and you can get views and likes. And so I think that's the other problem, right? Like, all these basic behaviors that I think all 4 of us have found after testing everything out there and having access to everything that's like rad and technical and forward thinking. Like we've all of us have sort of returned back to these basic ideas of you need to eat fruits and vegetables and protein. You got to walk a lot. You need to move. You got to take care of your tissues. You need to breathe through your nose. Like it's these really basic practices that we've all come back to, except for those things aren't sexy on social media. And I think that's another part of the problem.
And your kids aren't doing them. Every single thing we've talked about here, I guarantee you, if we dropped into any high school, I'm like, did you sleep 8 hours a night? Nope, didn't. Okay, I'm compromised, diminished, limited. Did your kids, that research came out 2 weeks ago looking at obesity trends in the United States. They polled parents And in the last week, 50% of the kids had not eaten a vegetable,
Yeah.
and 35% of the kids hadn't eaten a fruit.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Well, I think the other thing that's so great about teenagers too, as well, is that they are the greatest bullshit litmus test. I mean, that's the other thing I think that has, pulled Kelly and I off of these extremes, is that, I mean, and it's one of the things I love. Like, you could literally spend your life's work, John, making like some protein powder that you think is the greatest thing and is going to change everybody's life.
Man.
And you give it to our teenage kid, and they will, in 2 seconds, don't care. They will be like, this is disgusting. No one's going to eat this. And your life's work is a piece of shit, John. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other great thing about kids, is they're like, yeah, no.
Well, this is like a constant fight for me with this. I mean, not so much with my kids, but even like, we had a big annual deal on our programs, and I got the chance to probably do close to 100 consults thus far. And some guy was like, asking, talking to me like, hey, I want to get down 7% body fat.
Wow.
And I was kind of asking him, I was like, dude, it's super aggressive. I'll just tell you, every time that I've been below sub 10% body fat, I was not able to eat tacos. And one of my saddest moments was I was at my brother's house for my sister's birthday, and her birthday is the day after. She said that the 31st, I'm the 30th. And we had a huge like party, and Louisa, who's a family friend, she came over and brings her like taco thing and just makes the most amazing tacos. And we were doing a challenge. It was a Jack Street challenge, and we were having to weigh in, and I watched everybody just smashing tacos. I had ice cubes, and I ended up being like 7%, 8%.
You won, John. You won fitness. Then you retired that day.
And you were so sad.
And you kept your
and-
7% abs the rest of your life.
You know what? I look back at it, and I was so sad that I missed those tacos, because they're great tacos. But like anytime I've ever been super lean, I haven't been able to eat tacos. Having a drink. I mean, you almost have to like make the margin of error so small that you remove all the fun. Like, here's my, I'm going to go out and eat with people, but I have to bring my own meal because I don't know what they're going to put on there. There might be oil, there might be this, the calories. You end up becoming so regimented, and it's extremely like, and I think there's people that are set up for it. But I wonder if it's somehow proving somebody from the 3rd grade who called you fat wrong 30 years later. Like, there's got to be some darkness, there's got to be some demons. And I think that there's a ability for balance. And I think really what I got from this book is like, you should be able to have balance. And I think we've lost balance because people really aren't doing the basic things that they need to in their lives. Like, they're not out like working in their garden. They're not out, taking care of their animals. They're not out walking to the store. I mean, all the basic things that we would have done, before the advent of all this bitchin' technology, it was probably the stuff that allowed us to evolve to the point at which we did.
We were interviewing Chris McDougall, who wrote Born to Run. I don't know if you guys know him.
We've had him on the podcast.
He's become a friend over the years, and in his book, Raising Sherman, he's talking about racing donkeys. Once he moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, he one of the things he started to get into is like, why have this culture around him, this kind of traditional,
like Amish and
Mennonite culture. Why do they maintain horses? Like, what is it about that? It can't be, because it can't, what is about that technology? And what he came up with was, you have to be intentional about where you're going. You have to be you have to take care of an animal. You have to think about someone else's, the animal to care and feeding. You have to put it away. It makes a better society as a rate limiting step. It just makes better, more integrated people who have to care and be aware of what's going on around them. And so suddenly they were like, oh, this is a truth, that when we have animals, drawing us places, then we are better people. And, I think it's really difficult for people to get a sense of these inputs and outputs of, because the body is so tolerant. One of the things that we're trying to do with this book is, I said, create a resource for coaches, particularly, to say, hey, we're going to spend an hour in here and we're going to work on movement and coaching and strength and conditioning, but I also need you to do this. And here's the resource for you to get started, or you need to get off statins, or the neighbor. I mean, everyone who's listening to this has had 10,000 conversations, just like we have with their neighbors.
Yep.
You're dragging someone up the street and the person thinks you're crazy and doesn't even know where to start. You can hand them this book, or your uncle who's overweight or on, high blood pressure meds. So we wanted to create a resource to say, hey, look, we know that you're curious about your health. Start here.
Well, because every coach listening to this has had that experience, which we saw time and time again running a gym for so many years, where it's like you're at home, you program, like John Smith is coming in to train with you, you do this amazing, awesome program, and then you show up and John is hungover, tweaked his back playing pickleball with his friends on the weekend, hasn't slept. And, that's the John that you have to try to work with for that 1 hour. And so you have to completely change what you're doing and work within the parameters of someone who has shown up 100% not ready. And then you have to wonder, what is this client or customer going to be doing for the other 23 hours of the day that you're not able to work with them? And so that was the other, that was just like what Kelly said. That was one of the reasons we wrote this book, is to say, hey, coaches, you guys are on the front lines working with people who are really struggling, but you only get to work with them for 1 hour. So here's this resource you can hand to people with these really basic, simple behaviors that, you can say, hey,
are
look,
you are objective. You can measure it and they can report it to you.
yeah, this is what you do in the other 23 hours a day when you're not here working with me at the gym.
In line with nutrition, one of the cool tests that jumped out to me, the Frappuccino test. And this can also,
I'm so glad you're the first person
Yeah,
to bring
you're
up the
the first
Frappuccino
person to
test.
ask us
Well,
about this, and we love
hell
this
yeah.
test.
It's called the glucose tolerance test, but I like the
Yes.
Frappuccino test.
it took me a moment because I thought Frappuccino was like the name of some Italian scientist. And then I had to remember and recall that this is like a fancy, sugary treat.
Hey,
from
G
Starbucks.
Ferrari.
It's a
Talk about
breakfast.
This is
It's a
it's
breakfast
Kelly's.
milkshake.
Yeah,
Talk about an insulated bubble I live in. But
Yeah,
so
it's a breakfast milkshake.
dude. God,
explain
I have
the
so
test.
many
Good, John.
good. I don't. No, let him explain. But I have
No, go ahead.
So many amazing coffee stories with that involve the Starretts and Kelly. It's it's almost like I should do a coffee table book of just coffee table stories of going places, getting coffee with Kelly, having coffee with Kelly. When it was
Coaches in cars getting coffee.
No, it was when KStarr was a baby. Like I was sleeping on Kelly's couch and I got up because he was like basically shushing her to try to get her to go like,
Oh, Caroline.
Yeah. It was when Caroline was a baby, and, like, as baby get up and you kind of like rock them back and forth and you do this thing called white noise where you go, shh, and you try to make white noise. So I'm laying there on the couch and I hear it. And I thought Kelly was making cappuccino because it sounded like frothing milk. So I got up thinking that, you know what, it's totally 3 a.m. Why wouldn't Kelly Starrett be up making cappuccino? So I get up and I look, and he's holding he's holding Caroline. And so we sit down and he's like, "God, did I wake you up?" I'm like, "No, I just thought you were making cappuccino." And we sat there and laughed, as people, obviously
14 years ago.
I think you guys probably then did make cappuccino at that point.
Well, we were up.
I'm pretty sure we did make coffee at that point.
John is the greatest wingman of all time. I mean, really, you know this better than us, Tex, but I mean, John is like, "Oh, so we're doing now? Cool."
Yeah.
I got it. You're doing it. No problem. One of the things that you hinted at is this idea of sort of metabolic flexibility. That, one of the reasons the companion test that goes with this Frappuccino test, this glucose tolerance test, is, can you go a day without eating? Right. And so look, let me set this up. Fasting became very, very cool for a hot second, and still people are dabbling, and intermittent fasting became super cool. And it turns out, Juliet and I was like, I think this is just calorie control for adults. Like, and then the research came out and said, what? Oh, you lost all your muscle mass too. And it's just calorie control for adults.
It's also really bad for women.
Yeah.
One of the reasons
more than 12 hours on the women's side.
That's right. And one of the reasons that I tried it, because I was like, oh, this is, I'm experimenting. I'm a middle-aged guy. I'm not training for anything. My life isn't on the line. One of the things I found is if I didn't eat breakfast, I was like, cool, I'm not hungry. I can totally drink black coffee until noon. Like, that's not a big deal. It's not a big lift to miss this. But suddenly my workouts in the afternoon sucked. I was underfueled. I just didn't perform well. And I was way behind on my calories. So during this calorie window, I had to eat and eat and eat. And I was never eating enough to get my protein macros, get my fruits and vegetables in. And then I had to eat again at like 9 or 10 o'clock because I was starving, and to just close the window of actually eating enough food. And then I go to bed on a big stomach and like, sleep like shit. And then I'd wake up and be like, fast again. I was like, this doesn't work for me at all. So, but the idea here is we want to set people up so that if you didn't eat for a day, you shouldn't freak out. And we see that people have not fasted and they have such tight controls with food that we put that in there so that people could feel what it's like to not eat, to challenge that and see how they felt. Like, can you suddenly, like, there's no food for 12 hours, you're going to freak out? And then the other side of that is that, man, we see people who get a little sugar and spin out. And
or whatever. They just, like you said earlier, John, they become so restricted and just in this little teeny lane of what they can eat and even tolerate that, they can't even, have a single Frappuccino without needing to be hospitalized.
Well, it was Laird Hamilton who actually had this. I was talking with Laird, and Laird was like, if you bonk when we're out there, you're a liability. If we're working all day and you bonk, you're like, like we just got work to do. You're a liability. And conversely, he's like, if you eat a hamburger and your knuckles swell up and it gives you diarrhea, he's like, that's what we had to eat, a hamburger. And if you can't process that on the other side too, he also saw that as being too precious. You'd made yourself too precious.
No, it makes sense. I mean, we like this restrictive nature, and I just keep wondering, like, it's almost like I'm in this bad place, or I'm in a place I'm not happy. To get out of this place, I have to go so far to one side or the other to fix it, and I just don't think it's sustainable. Do I like to eat steak? 100%. Do I think that everybody should eat be a carnivore? 100%. But I also know that we're omnivores and we're designed to consume other things. And it just seems crazy to me that people would self-restrict so much. I mean, the fasting thing was hot, and I remember reading the research 10 plus years ago, and it just looked like a fancy way to caloric restrict, like just like you guys said. Yeah. But yet, what people end up doing is they end up tying this stuff to magic. And now all of a sudden, when you fast and you starve yourself, now all of a sudden, here's all the magical things that happen, just like on the carnivore stuff. Like, believe me, I'm 100% like the biggest carnivore on the planet. I just am not naive enough to say like that's going to be my only thing. I also really like apples, and these bitchin' oranges are in stock, and like I do like green I do like green leafy vegetables, and I like squashes and all these other things. And I go to the store and I buy them. I come home and I cook them, and we do like the rule is we can't eat the same thing twice. You got to like pick something else, different colors, like blackberries, blueberries, the cherries are in, and you kind of constantly go and you're like, okay, this is the one we're going to eat for 2 or 3 days, and we're going to get another one. And you just keep rotating through these. And it's more, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I'm sure you guys know many people that have had a problem drinking alcohol or drugs or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, they can never, ever have a drink again. And you're like, okay, if that's what allows you to go straight and narrow, that's fine. But like, you should be able to socially, at a friend's wedding or whatever, have a glass of wine and not end up in Vegas, like naked and somewhere like, selling your Rolex, like leaving Las Vegas. Like I'm always nervous by the people that have to become so extreme, or more importantly, have to paint them into such like a fixed corner to be able to make progress.
Yeah, we don't want to get there in the first place, do we?
Well, yeah, and not to beat a dead horse, but man, this is like a giant error we've made in our industry, and why we've left so many people behind. Because again, those moms and dads and people in our neighborhood who want to be healthy, like they can get behind doing some of these extreme things for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 30 days, but it's not sustainable. Nobody in my neighborhood is still intermittent fasting anymore. Like 3 years ago, everyone's like, I'm intermittent fasting, it's epic. Well, no one's doing it anymore because it's not sustainable. Yeah. And so again, it's like those extremes, again, might work for some of us who are in this business and live and breathe, nerding out on nutrition, but it doesn't work for literally 99% of people. And so we've just left those people behind.
And we haven't shown them how, if you're going to be heroic, use that willpower to do the thing that you need willpower for, sitting down and relearning algebra. I mean, like that's where you're going to have to sit down with your kids and like summon the power of the universe to be able to teach yourself algebra again. That's where you should use it. Not like, should I eat or should I go to bed a half hour earlier? You should just set up the environment so you do the right thing. And one of the things that we're trying to do in this book is, like, if someone wanted to get good at biking, what we wouldn't do is say, hey, let's watch the video on biking and let's do a bunch of biking like things. We'd be like, let's get on the bike and start training the bike. You're going to suck today, but the thing we need to do is get the exposure. And if sitting on the ground is a great example, where one of the first interventions we have in the book is trying to get people just to sit on the ground in the evening. So you have it built in with jiu-jitsu. Spend so much time on the ground. So your ground time is just built in. You're already there. You're working. A lot of people maybe you're gardening and that's what you do. But a lot of people have not sat on the ground ever and haven't sat on the ground since like kindergarten. First grade, you get a chair and then you're never sitting on the ground again. So one of the first things we're trying to get people to do to rewild their hips is just to spend 30 minutes sitting on the ground while they're watching their evening TV. All of a sudden you're 90-90, you're long sitting, you're kneeling, and you're exposing yourself to these positions, which is the thing we need first. Exposure to the thing is the most important thing.
Yeah. And you're secretly getting a hip mobility practice in without actually calling it a hip mobility practice because, you don't care about that.
Well, I'm the one thing that was so impressive is the range of motion you have in your knee replacement. Like it blew me away to see you sitting on your heels like that. I used to be able to do that. And then due to this osteophyte bone spurs in the back of my knee, I can't bend my right knee as well. And I can't sit on my left leg like you used to. So now I've been working, like I went back and did all the pigeon stretch in the couch and I started doing all this stuff, trying to get more mobility. Cause I'm like, well, if my right knee is a little bummed, I'm just going to make sure my left knee is as mobile as possible. And it's been pretty interesting. Like, as I've gotten in and started doing it, like the pain, especially in like the front part, like where the patellar tendon attaches to the quadriceps tendon, like the pain and just like the stretching feeling in there. And I'll kind of like sit back into it and kind of like, God damn it, I didn't have this before. And it's because I think what happens is people either get an injury or something happens and you just stop doing these things. And the reason that it became really prevalent to me was, obviously squatting and lifting weights, you can kind of get away with it. But now all of a sudden, as I'm going and doing jiu-jitsu and messing with these kids, and I call them kids, they're in their 20s, they're so fucking mobile. And all of a sudden there'll be like something I can't do to one side because I don't have as much range of motion. So now I just have to like have almost like a segmented part of my game to know that like if I'm going to do like a knee slice or this, I'm just going to do it off of the left side. So I'm like, I just need more range of motion. But the one I did want to bring up, and I know this is like a personal one for me and also for you, is hip extension.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Okay.
I posted that video the other day of Victor, one of Victor Hugo, one of my BJJ guys, doing Bulgarian split squats, focusing on hip extension with the knee behind the glute and all the different pieces we've talked about. And I was hoping to get some dialogue from people, and I haven't got really any because I don't know if people understand the concept the way we're teaching it.
Nope.
Okay. So I've said this on a bunch of other podcasts, but I have to say it again here because I can't emphasize it enough that if Kelly Starrett had a subtitle, it would be Kelly Starrett hip extension. That's his human subtitle.
Knees behind Buckeye. Knees behind Buckeye.
At least, over the last couple of years, he spent a lot of years obsessing over feet straight squatting because there was a lot of chatter on the internet.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fighting and idiocy that went on around squatting, and Kelly would spend his evenings thinking about it. But now what he spends his evenings thinking about is hip extension.
Yeah. And the fact that people think just standing up is hip extension. Like when you thank you for letting Kelly come to the collective. It was great to be around him and see him. And but the part that was solid gold was when we started talking about this. And as you started explaining it, I didn't realize that people didn't know the difference. They thought hip extension was just extending.
I extend the hips every day. I squat.
Yeah, I squat. No. And they didn't understand that the knee has to be behind the glute, similar to like hip extension and losing hip extension when you sprint and when you run.
Well, I think it was Ronnie Coleman who says everyone wants to be fast, but no one wants to extend those tiny ass weight hips, whatever it was. Look, everyone is arguing about squatting, and no one spends any time talking about being able to have your knee behind your butt in a lunge, pushing off from that position, cutting. Like that is the goal. And what we have, in the book, we talk about working with Travis Mash, and all of a sudden he's like, Kelly, you solved all this back pain and knee pain for us just by getting us to, spend more time in doing rear foot elevated split squats, just the exposure to those positions. And one of the things I'm tasked with when I come in and work with elite teams or athletes is they're like, hey, I want you to look at my programming, or I ask to look at their programming. And you can just see these big holes there where people aren't in that shape or touching those shapes very little. And it turns out that, your ability to have your hip and extension and your butt working in that position is the jam. And if you want to, in my heart of hearts believe, if you want to cure hamstring tears, you have to get people's butts to be able to squeeze when they're running and in hip extension. And the reason they tear that hamstring is that they can't access the glute because the anterior line is tight, that whatever that is, quads, hip flexor, inhibition, whatever. And then the hamstring's doing double duty. It's trying to extend your hip and flex your leg, and it can't do both.
Well, and also, just for everybody who doesn't want to think about this so technically, like walking is hip extension and running is hip extension, right? And those are things that human beings should be able to do their entire life.
Dude, the elliptical machine solved this problem. It took away hip extension. You don't actually have to extend your hip in the elliptical machine. That's genius.
Hey, just
you go forward to straight up and down.
But you need hip extension to be a human, like to be able to do the things humans.
And that's why your back
you need
hurts, and why your knee hurts, and why you suck, and why you have a bit bunion on your toe. I mean, all of that is that.
It's also,
that shape.
And also back to our whole sitting thing, like hip extension is like the antidote to all this sitting we're doing with 90-degree angle joints all the time. Right. So that's fine. We're not anti-sitting. Sitting's amazing. But if you want to sit a lot, then you've got to get into the opposite position, which is hip extension.
Can I introduce a concept to the power athlete people? I don't know if they've heard this before, but it's called session cost. And it came from one of our friends, Ben Ashworth, who was the first team physio for Arsenal. And he was like, yeah, we're trying to reduce session costs with that behavior. And I was like, tell me more about that. And it was a way of looking at sort of the implied demands on the body the day after a training stimulus. So that's how they were using it. So big volume, the next day, the session cost is your ability to generate force, or how that, soreness, or how it implicated your range of motion. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with all these recovery behaviors is limit the amount of session cost from the training the day before, whatever that is, running volume, lifting volume, a game, how to reduce the session costs from the game so we get back to practicing, et cetera, et cetera. How do we adapt better? But we've expanded that idea of session cost into looking at movements or behaviors in the day. So if you sit all day long, you may or may not have pain, but it will implicate or cost you your ability to extend your hip effectively, or rotate effectively, or put your arms over your head. So we can start to say, well, the session cost from being sedentary is that you will have less access to your positions. And that's good, because a lot of the conversations about why we should do things were always geared towards injury prevention or pain. And Juliet and I are like, as we can control for a lot of injury through like things like sleep and nutrition and good training and volume, but some injuries we can't account for. And pain certainly, is highly subjective. So what can we wrap our heads around? Well, we can wrap our heads around access to your physiology. Can you do what your body is supposed to do? And if you're engaged in a set of behaviors, like you're a cyclist, and all of a sudden you can't extend your hip very well, that's the cost of all the cycling you're doing.
Well, I mean, like I was thinking in the cycling deal, especially because the knee is always in front and there's really no eccentric load, so you're always pushing. I mean, it's probably one of those primary movements that the minute you step off the bike, we have to do some form of strength and hip extension, and something that involves some eccentric load. I mean,
that's right. And so it's exactly right. So now you can apply this idea and say, hey, I'm doing this thing because biking is my jam. What things do I need to do in the weight room to train so I become and maintain being a complete cyclist? I think that's where we lost the mind, where sports specific training became, well, how do I get just better at pushing concentrically on the pedal? And that's fine if that's in season. But ultimately, one of the reasons we're training, and one of the reasons we're trying to create these vital sign language for people, is it allows them to sort of become curious about some of their limitations. And then, why do I have that limitation? So you're absolutely right. We're into regression and progression. The progression of the thinking, the session cost, is exactly what you said. Hey, we need to get some eccentric loading on here. Here's a kettlebell. We need to make sure that you're in some hip extension. Here's some isometrics with your rear foot elevated. Boom. Bob's your uncle. Meanwhile, we could also scale that back to say, hey, let's make sure that you're, least walking or paying attention to these movement minimums.
Well, and we also have never, and there has never been a single place where people can get these objective measures. So if you're a cyclist and that you're in hip flexion all the time and know that you've got to make sure you're maintaining your hip extension, like we have a test, like go take the test and see where you are, and that's the same true for all the other sort of movement mobility chapters we have in this book. Like there's a test and you can get some information.
Our data, your range of motion is bigger than, stronger than your feelings.
What is there a correlation between like the other statistic I and actually was looking at the amount of people over the age of 50 that are getting their hips replaced is fucking through the roof.
Yeah.
And they were almost talking about knees just kind of wear out and people usually get them in their 60s and 70s. I mean, obviously, your traumatic injury and history for it, necessitated it. But they talk about knees wearing out just, within this kind of, time frame. And then if they pull out people that have traumatic injury from athletes, it kind of quantifies into a certain kind of group. But the one thing that they're talking about now is this dramatic rise of hip replacements in people, around the age of 50, because the big issue becomes, after there's only so many opportunities to replace it. So what are they going to do to try to get these people into the 70s and 80s? Because I think they can only do the hip maybe twice, maybe 3 times. And they are having issues where I think they called it biofilm, that the reason they're not replacing it isn't because the joint wears out, but because the body starts creating biofilm and starts causing different infections and they're having problems. So they got to basically go put in fresh ones. I wonder, as we start talking about this lack of hip extension and what people are doing, if maybe one of the culprits for hip longevity is putting somebody into hip extension and doing some form of strength training because they're just not doing it.
Well, I mean, one thing we know is that in cultures where people are always practicing their range of motion, specifically their hip range of motion, like where, people sit on the ground and sleep on the ground, there's a dramatic difference in the number of joint replacements and general orthopedic injuries. So, I mean, I think your theory is probably correct.
Some of it is just use it or lose it. You literally have to lubricate and take and be in those positions to just refresh and keep the cartilage has to be loaded in order for it to be cartilage. If you want a strong tendon, you have to eccentrically, concentrically, and isometrically load the tendon. If you don't, it's not a tendon. If you don't use your cartilage, it's not cartilage. And your body's like, well, we don't need that cartilage. It'll degrade. So it's absolutely Wolf's Law, very much, but not just about bones, but about your loading tissues. So we're talking about your connective tissue, your bony tissue. But also, as you point out, and we've talked about here, if you can't extend your butt, if you can't extend your hip and squeeze your butt, if your butt doesn't effectively support the joint, then you potentially are transmitting a ton more force through the joint that would be absorbed by the musculature and connective tissue systems. All of these systems are working simultaneously. It's not just your muscles, not just your joints, it's not just your connective tissue. But if you take one of the pillars out, you're going to ask that joint to do a lot of work in a very tiny range of motion, not supported by big butts. Look, there's a reason there's a saying, thick thighs save lives. I mean, that is the truth. And so what you're really bringing up is, man, you did so much sitting, you became positionally inhibited. You don't have access to that position or control in that position. Your butt doesn't work and you don't have range of motion. And you eat like crap and you didn't load in your 20s, man, it's a perfect storm recipe for ending up with joints that didn't go the long haul. Your body's designed to last 100 years, period. Full stop. So the question is, how do we get there? And unfortunately, it doesn't look like a jazzercise class one day a week. That's just insufficient. We have to be looking at people's homes and what they're doing day to day.
I love that you referred to Zumba, because that was always the joke in CrossFit, being like, it's a Zumba class. And I don't even know if they even teach Zumba anymore. Isn't it a Caribbean dance kind of deal?
I don't know. I think it's still a thing.
Oh, it's very much a thing.
It's a thing.
And
Kelly's I know, because I go to Zumba 3 days a week. That's how I work on my salsa.
I was in a conference and I was standing next to, it was up at Good Life in Canada. I was standing next to the small class fitness instructor. And I was like, Zumba's not fitness. And she was like, what? And she was like, really, like, just threw off her gloves and was ready to throw down. I was like, hold up. I said, you guys are selling it like it's the end all be all to all the problems of humanity. I was like, Zumba's rad. Yes, your heart rate gets up. That's an ancillary benefit. Yes, you're loading, but people are stoked. You're in a community, you're doing reflective movement, you're dancing, there's rhythmicity there. I said, but quit trying to sell it as fat loss. Quit it. Like, quit trying to sell it as strength training. Like, why don't you just sell it as dance? Like, dance should be enough. And Zumba, if you go to a Zumba class, John, you and I would laugh our asses off the entire time.
I'm sure we'd have a great time. I'd be ecstatic.
One of the things that we're trying to do more and more now is we're like, hey, in this crazy ass fitness world, I'm like, can I see your bona fides? I need to see what your solutions are. I need to see your result. I need to see who you're working with. And what you can say is Zumba is great, but then I'm like, well, can Zumba get me to the Olympics? Oh, it can't. Okay, so maybe it's incomplete,
Unless the Olympics is in Zumba.
That's also true. Breakdancing might be in the Olympics. You got to practice the thing.
But I mean, we've become so reasonable though, John, over the years. I mean, if you asked us this question 10 years ago, we would have been like, you got a CrossFit 3 days on, 1 day off.
Dude, that's why I'm laughing, because like we've like walked back on so many of these non-negotiables, because you realize that like people die out the margins of their experience. And like, if you almost have to like pull it back, because when you start going so extreme, you're just getting into this like small segment of the population. And, like I just go back to Rob's statement that like 93% of the people are either some form of, like obesity, statins, drugs, like on some myriad that like, if it just stopped, they would perish in a year. Like there's so many people to save in this whole thing that like going out to the extremes to just isolate yourself, or more importantly, alienate, doesn't make sense if you're trying to save a whole bunch of people really quickly.
Yeah.
No, and if the ultimate goal is movement, which is our ultimate goal, right? Which is why we called this book Built to Move. The ultimate goal is to get people moving more and feeling better in their body. Like, who really gives a crap how people want to do that? I mean, we think walking is fundamental and everybody should do that. But man, if Zumba makes you feel good and you move your body a little bit, like, awesome.
Because it's a slippery slope. Pretty soon it's Zumba, then you're eating raw buffalo testicles and lifting weights. That's how it goes.
If the two of you go to a Zumba class, I would like to join and be your videographer.
I think it'd be an excellent idea. All right. Well, you talked about walking. I'd like to talk a little bit about shoes. I know, our Power Athlete preferred shoe is the Vans, but it's because I've been wearing them since I'm 4 years old. So it's just more of a, people are like, why you guys fans of Vans? I'm like, because I grew up in Southern California and these are the shoes that my mom bought us. So I've been wearing them all the time. But like, I mean, the shoe thing has gone through such an interesting, like the cascade of like, the Reebok pumps and big. And then all of a sudden when the minimalist shoe, and next thing you know, we were like tying, cut up tires around your feet. I mean, it's gone into this evolution, but really what we're talking about is the dysfunction in the foot. And realize that people aren't walking around barefoot. Like that's something I get in when people ask me about shoes. Like, oh, what shoes should I be wearing? I'm like, well, how much barefoot are you going? Like, do you walk around barefoot at all? No, I never walk around barefoot. And I'm like, I just don't know if there's any shoe that's going to necessarily help you. I mean, there's shoes like, I know Chris is wearing these, what are those?
Vivos.
Yeah, the Vivos.
But I got really fat feet, not flat. They're fat.
Well,
yeah, I have fat feet too.
Not like a first grade pencil, baby.
So
I just
like how much barefoot walking? I mean, I know, you guys are like us where Asian culture, nobody wears shoes in the house. Everybody has to walk around barefoot at all times. So.
Well, I would like to say that the whole trajectory of the shoe thing has been really weird. And we just were at a 2-day water polo tournament last weekend where we, we're observing all the parents. And if you're like a middle-aged mom in Northern California, you are wearing a Hoka shoe. Like that's like
it looks like a clown shoe.
Like
the girls have a Hoka, like the 3-inch running shoes.
Running shoes. Like that's
what people walk around in now.
Yeah, that's
so they want to wear like high heel shoes, like the equivalent of like a high heels. I want to be 3 inches.
No, they're flat.
They're sort of flat, but they're so squishy. The sole is like this thick.
They look like platforms.
Those running shoes that everybody's wearing. Anyway, so it's been weird to see, right? Because we also have so many friends of ours that are wearing the Vivo barefoot shoe. Kelly loves that shoe. But, what we try to say is, look, it's been a hard sell to get people to take their shoes off and go for a barefoot walk in their neighborhood. Like that's a hard sell. For a lot of people, that is too extreme. But at the bare minimum, Man, don't wear a shoe in your house. Be barefoot in your own house because your foot is so
Imagine if you just wore
complicated. And
gloves all the time.
Yeah.
What would happen if you just wore gloves? And we argued about which gloves you were wearing. I mean, that's what we're talking about. If it's the same system, hey, which gloves should I wear, John? We're like, you don't wear any gloves, like.
But it's like those Hoka shoes are like everybody wearing like ski and snowboard gloves on their feet.
There's
their kids.
There's a new phrase you'll like this. I intending on trying to offend people, but if you ask the kids, there's a new concept out called the almond mom. Do you know what an almond mom is?
No,
My
I did
kids
not.
accuse me of being an almond
There
mom,
you're
and they would
not. They were just busting your
100%
balls.
accuse Kate of being an almond
No,
mom.
no. An almond mom is like that. She's hyper skinny, no muscle mass, but only like for like a meal eats like 3 almonds. That's an
Oh.
almond
That's an
mom.
almond
Like
mom. And
super into
then
diet culture and weight obsessed.
and probably does a lot of like only running, like
Cardio.
running or only cardio.
So if you can
And-
Google almond mom and you'll see that it's in the slang, but the almond
Oh.
mom Hoka nexus is very strong.
yeah, there's
you
a
wear these
real connection between
huge
the Hoka.
shoes. It looks like you have little flower pots, little peony stems coming out of these flower pots.
Here it is. Almond mom has become a shorthand that describes any parent, guardian, or authority figure who's a victim of diet culture, not just moms. Someone unhealthy, preoccupied with eating healthy, exercise, and body image. I'm going to let you know, Kate had to reinvest herself into a fitness challenge for one of our local Harry Shaw's gym. So she had to go and get a DEXA scan and do her post up her before pictures. And she's like, I had to refocus a little bit. My pants were getting a little tight. So she comes back and shows me her DEXA scan. She was 14% body fat in her DEXA scan. That's her pre-starting.
She's
and
so lean.
Yeah. And she posted it. And then my buddy, one of the guys who trained her, Rosh, is like, I saw your wife's post. I was like, oh, what'd you think? He's like, it's like those people that talk about how they made their second $1 billion and needed to do it to get everybody in the family their own jet. And he's like, and then Kate was like, I didn't get much engagement on that podcast or on that post. And I was like, oh, what, did you get any feedback on it? She's like, no, nothing. And I'm like, yeah, because it's hard to post it before 14% body fat as a woman when that's like contest shape. Like women show up to a bodybuilding show more than that. But
Juliet has abs still, and I call it her ab privilege. You don't just I'm like, just check your ab privilege. You and Kate. You just woke up.
I felt good though earlier. I was like, oh yeah, I can definitely see my belt buckle. Like I'm good. Check.
Yeah. You're like, oh God, you gotta look down.
The shoe thing is really, look, you're an adult, you're a grown ass, do whatever you want with your feet, but just don't pretend like it's all the same. But the real thing is just don't mess up your kids' feet. I think that's what's so shocking. The American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a position paper, said the best shoe for kids is no shoe. And then the second best shoe is the shoe that limits the function of the foot the least. We were, I was doing a talk at a big high school that uses our book in one of their classes, locally, Windsor High School. And they're doing a section on running. And I said, hey, kids, take your shoes off. Now, here's the ball of your foot. Here's your heel. We did all this foot stuff. We did 27 squat drill. We made them feel their feet. We did a little running. And then I was like, okay, now put your shoes back on and find that same position. The kids were like, what? I can't wear these shoes are terrible. They're pushing me. Oh my God. They're like, do I have to wear these shoes the rest of the day? I mean, they just didn't even realize the inputs that they were getting. And it really is the allegory for exactly what we're talking about is that, man, you're getting really strange input through your whole body all day long because you're wearing some Yeezy fashion sneaker.
This sets me up for a great story about Kelly though.
Oh boy.
So you guys know, having been in this fitness space for a long time, that it's only been maybe in the last 5 or 6 years that for men, stretchy pants and shorts have become a thing. We were beneficiaries of that as women a little bit earlier with the Lululemon legging. But it took a while for it to kind of get into the men's fitness space. And so during that long time when Kelly was wearing jeans that were made of jeans and board shorts to train, the amount of asses of pants that he blew out was all of them. To the point where he actually had to start wearing underwear just to be sure that he wouldn't cause a scandal. But he was at Windsor High School. You can envision it like this high school
300
auditorium,
kids.
300 kids. He's up on the sort of janky high school stage wearing jeans and pops into a full squat and does a full complete blowout of his jeans.
But it's loud.
It's loud. It makes a sound. And it's not just a little blowout. It's from the front of the jeans all the way to the top, complete blowout. And so, fortunately he had a sweatshirt or something and he just was like, well, good thing I'm wearing underwear.
They didn't go to jail that day. I'm gonna rip off the crotch.
I mean, did you do that, John? Did you have a phase of butt blowout?
Hold on. Look at this.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, they're all blown out.
You're like
hamstring privilege.
Yeah, I just actually, as I sat down this morning, blew out my pants as I sat down. And as I'm sitting here, if you see me kind of fidgeting, it's actually my thighs being stuck on this wooden chair. So when you talked about the blowout, I'm like, I know exactly what you're going through. It's part of the struggle.
It's real.
I don't know. Like I search for jeans that have spandex.
Wranglers.
The Wranglers. Dude. I know. So Wrangler has these
Wranglers has spandex now?
Yeah, you bet.
So you can get on and off the horse.
Yeah. So they've added spandex into their jeans and they're super legit. So they're plenty long enough. So they're actually good jeans. But believe me, I've blown out plenty of jeans.
When I wore your jeans, John, I was not able to blow them out. I tried, but I wasn't able to do it.
When what was it when we were at the CrossFit seminars and I go to demo and I was like, I can't demo anymore. I can't I just can't afford this many jeans. I had like 10 pairs and just kept blowing out the crotch, it was terrible. Oh man. But the shoe thing's super interesting for me because I pulled up some stuff like I have a pair of the original Jordan kind of Air Force Ones, and I love them because they're super flat. Like they are just they're super paper thin, super flat. It feels like, I think about the Vans or even like the Chuck Taylors or the Air Force Ones, like the ones that we wore as kids. And then all of a sudden, there was this trajectory somewhere in the early 2000s. And so you guys were Nike or Reebok athletes. I was a Nike athlete. And as I would get my Nike deal, we had to get $10,000 worth of shit a year. So you'd go and just order all this stuff and end up giving it most away to your family. But I would order just a bunch of shoes, and the shoes that show up were almost unwearable because they were just comical. They were like clown shoes. And I would just end up giving them to kids in the neighborhood or random people, be so stoked.
Here, kid, you want a size 16 shoe?
Oh yeah. I'd be like, here you go. You can put these on, you can live in them like a little vessel. But what was crazy is I saw this evolution of shoes that were okay to play basketball in and wear. And then they just went into this ridiculous phase. And now it's like, you see these running shoes, like you're talking about with 3-inch soles. And I'm like, what was the evolution this way? Because if anything, the barefoot technology has shown us that these are the worst shoes you can wear. So why not take a little bit of that technology and go in this direction and try to make people have healthier feet when they seem to be going the opposite direction?
Well, it seems like to me, I always see Kelly, I think, was the one who started me thinking about this. But to me, the Hoka shoe is the beginning of the end for middle-aged runners in particular, right? Maybe they know and have even experimented with a more minimalist shoe.
But they can't run the same volume and they're not strong.
But they can't do it. They're not strong. They can't maintain it. And they found that the only way they can keep up their cardio practice, which is part of their identity, almond mommy. It's what they think is, controlling their weight and going to help them live long and the only way they can continue doing that without pain is to run in these, crazy shoes. And so, I always see it as the beginning of the end. I'm like, okay, well, this is people's final solution before they have to just hang up their running shoes and switch to biking or something. I mean, to me, I see it as the beginning of the end.
Do people in your neighborhood? Do people in your neighborhood still think you guys are crazy because you guys are lifting weights in your garage?
100%.
Our neighbors came over one day and they're like, "You cracked the concrete in front of our house." I was like, "How?" They're like, "You dropped those weights," and I was like, "This bumper plate over this horse stall mat over this 4-inch piece of concrete cracked your driveway
200 meters away."
I'm like, I don't think so. I'm not sure you know how physics works. Look, eventually, I have this sled that I push, it's one of those expo sleds that has the resistance to push it back. And sometimes I push it up the hill next to us, the street straight up, and people pull over when they're trucks and they're like, "Put it in the back. I'll carry it up for you." It just don't realize. I'm like, actually,
you're like, I'm trying to do this.
That reminds me of that god awful workout that you sent us years ago, the Texas cardio workout, which involved a 400-meter run with a 135-pound sandbag. Remember this?
Yes,
I do.
And as I dropped it on the way back, I was sitting there looking at it, and this dude pulled over and he's like, "It's okay, dude. Just throw it in the back. I'll help you." And I was like, fuck you. And I had to like shoulder this thing and
Yeah,
keep
you're like,
running.
Starrett's going to see if I throw this in the trunk.
Oh, fuck.
I know, I
Kelly
know.
used to send over these god awful workouts and be like, hey, give this one a try. And that,
Yeah, we ran a lot of experiments, and that's what I want people to understand is we've experimented on ourselves and our friends.
So you don't have to.
So you don't have to. And if you grab this book, you'll see that it's really refined, and there's a lot. It's probably our best ideas. I think it's the best thing we've done, and it has the potential to reach out and impact the most people. But man, we did a bunch of stupid shit, and I'm so grateful for it. But it really let us see what was essential.
Yeah, we had to do all that stuff.
What is essential? What stuck around? And it turns out all these things sticks around. You, John, actually were one of my first friends. You were saying even when you moved, before you moved to Texas, you were walking in the morning. You just started getting up and walking, and as we're seeing our friends like Huberman, talking about getting sun exposure, and Jack Cruz, and just the people really trying to get outside and get sunlight on your body. What's the ways to do that? We have to have essential behaviors that have like 10 bottom lines. If you want to know your neighbors, if you want to see your neighborhood, if you want to get sun on your body, you want to get your steps and decongest, you got to go walk.
This is totally random in that this was many, many years ago. My dad, grew up in Southern California, driving, in his car all over LA as a lawyer, drove with his window down, arm outside, ended up developing skin cancer on his face. And he went to a doctor, and he's like, the guy had to do like a surgery and like remove all this stuff. And the guy told my dad, he goes, if you could have prevented this if you just hadn't worn sunglasses.
He said that to your dad. Yeah. That's so
this is probably like 30 plus years ago. And
wow.
The doctor and my dad was like, what do you mean? Like not wear sunglasses? Like everybody wears sunglasses. And the doctor was like, and I forgot the terminology. He basically straw man poll of being a, doctor for all these years. He's like, I'm just telling you that people that don't wear sunglasses that drive like what you're doing don't have these problems. Everybody that comes in that has something, because this is pretty common in Southern California, people end up getting gross and kind of like skin cancer on the arm and on the face. He pretty much made a comment to my dad about sunglasses. So my dad came home, and I remember came home from the surgery, and he was telling us, he's like, this quack ass doctor said that I could have avoided this if I didn't wear sunglasses. And I always thought like, of course the guy's a quack. I mean, it seems fucking insane. Fast forward years later, and I remember I was talking to a professional surfer who was like, dude was tan, looked great. And he was like, I've never worn sunscreen my entire life, and made that comment. And I was like, oh, really? Like, how did you avoid it? He's like, it's kind of like, when the winter hits, like we just kind of like slow exposure, maybe I'll go out for a little bit and I just don't go out and get baked. I just kind of like slow exposure myself. And he's like, yeah. And also I don't wear sunglasses. And I like looked at the dude, and I was like, it's the second time I heard it in that way. And then, fast forward to a couple of years ago, I don't know if it was on Huberman's podcast or something. They talked about the body's ability to take in sun as like the body releasing some defense. I mean, some form of process happens where if you don't wear sunglasses, your body pretty much like produces something to protect your skin in such a way. And I thought that was like such an interesting one that surfer said it, and that doctor said it to my dad 30 plus years ago. I just haven't observed this anybody that wears sunglasses.
Well, Kelly learned that from the same thing from Laird years ago, and hasn't really worn sunglasses either. And Kelly's like super anti sunscreen.
Yeah, I don't wear sunscreen either, and I try almost to never wear sunglasses anymore.
And I don't get, so everyone's clear, I don't get burned. I try not to burn myself. I try to, I do wear long sleeves and a hat, and I'm a bald, so I try not to get burned, but I do systematically expose myself to sun so that I don't get burned. I think that's just like, hey, I didn't squat. I did all the squats. Now I have rhabdo and I'm crippled. There's this exposure thing that can happen. So
Laird said the same thing about the sunglasses.
Laird said the same thing.
And that was like, we first heard that from him like in 2016. I mean, that was a while ago.
Yeah. And I didn't wear sunglasses paddling because I just didn't like what happened to the water on the lenses. So I would always be out there. And I think that was one of the things I lucked out with.
Yeah, that's just an interesting one. But yeah, remember Yeah, God, I can't remember the
Sunlight
name
on
of
your
the
on your
surfer.
face. Again, once again, ask yourself, when did my kid get sunlight on her face today? Did that even happen? As we went from the house to the car to like, you suddenly you're like, holy moly, all the things we're arguing about or talking about. Ask yourself, did I expose my kids to this? Did my kids sit on the floor today? Do my kids have range of motion? Take all these tests, make your kids pass them, and you'll be shocked to find out your 9-year-old can't do it.
No, I'm pretty sure my kids can. I know.
Yeah, your kids.
Your kids can.
Yeah. My favorite is I get Jamie to stand in really interesting places, and then she has to basically put her feet together. Like if there's like a small place to perch, I'll make her stand up there, and she can like basically sit with her like her feet together, squat down. Like it's hilarious. The places I'll be like, you think you could perch up that and squat on that? She's like, no problem.
No problem, Jamie.
I
What
got
a
this, Dad.
savage.
Yeah, she's it's good. But
What
man, that sunglass one just blows my mind, and I wonder like when that piece will come out.
Yeah,
People
I
like,
think I think we're starting to get the image that a lot of this blue light is less effective for us, and that just we need full sun exposure, and we're tiptoeing around a lot of circadian biology here. That's really what this is about. How does our body know what to do, when to do, and where the inputs there? And this biological clock is an important piece, and sunlight helps regulate that thing for sure.
What I knew my brain was healing after I retired from the NFL, where there was a time there for a couple of years where I couldn't leave the house without sunglasses. Everything was like ultra bright. I couldn't drive. And then all of a sudden, like, I think I dropped them somewhere, and I was like, I'm just not going to get them. And all of a sudden I was driving. I was like, God, my eyes don't hurt the same way. Or I can go outside. And it just felt like that was kind of one of the moments I noticed where like I couldn't leave the house without sunglasses. Like it was just so bright and annoying.
Maybe you're brain
places.
damaged. Oh, KStarr's brain damage. She needs her sunglasses.
I always tell Kelly, I'm like, my eyes are so light. And also Kelly has this like shelf over his eyes that adds as like
It's
natural...
from Clan of the K-Bear. He has the memories.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. So
Neanderthals.
he's got that shelf. So
thanks, Isla.
Yeah, but for
My
me,
people,
too,
I do the fact that you guys remember Clan of the K-Bear the same way and you could use it. It's good.
Yeah, because we're 100 years old like you.
Amazing. As we wrap up here, was there anything you felt like we missed from this book in terms of just kind of creating a roadmap?
The one thing that I've been running into a lot for people, and I know you guys are talking about it through breath, but like some basic stuff within the neck. I feel like whether it, I know we've talked extensively about people in the turtle position with the iPhone. I wonder if there's like a piece in there on like how to cure your neck dysfunction from driving in this. I mean, everything, should do, but I wonder if there was a piece in there, or if there wasn't, I missed it, about like the technology piece. Did I miss it? And it was in there?
Well, back and shoulder mobility.
Was it back and shoulder?
Yeah, and we do have a chapter called Future Proof Your Neck and Shoulders.
Fuck. Okay, I missed that one then.
But really,
okay. Just letting me go with it. No, dude, we got the neck done.
I think you're right though. And what we try to do is take these systems approach and looking at people's shoulder function, looking at how well their back moves. And I think we do talk about trying to using walking as a time to do some eye movement, turn your head stuff,
breathing.
Just how do we sneak into these things? Because otherwise this book becomes 7,000 pages long and no one can do it. We got to get people interested, but it's interesting that the iron neck and neck isometrics now are back. People are realizing that, wow, turns out having a big, strong neck and big traps really helps you not get concussed. It helps. Imagine this. We have a system that's deconditioned, detrained, demoved, demobilized. You start putting isometrics into it and it does better. Holy shit. Like, come on, that's 101 towards any painful structure. We start adding isometrics to help desensitize and restabilize. And why would the neck be any different?
Well, for me, the biggest one I notice is that when people start chicken necking and getting their head forward, all of a sudden they start getting balance with that kyphosis. So, as I start noticing more and more people with that kyphosis, and my kids know it's like a joke, like almost like Captain Caveman. I'm like, Captain Kyphosis. And I see these people just so upper body, and they always ask, like, why are they hunched over? I'm like, because they got their head out in front of them. Like the body creates homeostasis. Like there's a pretty cool piece of research where women started getting breast implants and all of a sudden started gaining weight on the backside of their asses because their body was trying to get into homeostasis. Same thing on the kyphosis in the neck. So, I mean, that piece of like constantly, and I'd use the one for you. And I tell all the kids, like, remember what Kelly said about the phone. If they're going to look at the phone, they have to hold it up in front of their face with 2 hands. They can't like hunch over and get into these weird positions. I'm like,
Tall
dude,
girl posture.
Well, yeah. And
I'll
I also,
snatch the phone out of their hands.
what that makes me think of is this idea that we talk about a lot, which is that, you know, if you practice these positions all the time, like that becomes who you are. So if you practice your forward head on neck all the time and you practice sitting in a slump slouch position all the time, you know, then you can also later on wonder, you know, why is my neck jacked up? Or, you know, why did I tear my hamstring off my leg or whatever, right? You did that because you're practicing these positions
Session
all
cost.
day long.
Yeah.
That's the session cost of practicing those positions all day long.
And it's not about pain. It should be always about function and output. I think that's where, you know, we've lost.
I don't agree. I disagree with you.
Well, just because
People care about pain.
they do care about pain once they're in pain, but we can't say don't do this because it won't cause you pain. That's
Well,
the
I mean, if I mean, it seems crazy that people are living their entire lives trying to avoid hardship and pain. Like,
Yep.
Like there's, I mean, you know, think about like one of the first times I CrossFitted and your hands get sweaty because you keep putting them on your pants, and then all of a sudden you just shear the skin right off your hands.
Yeah.
And it's happened to all of us. And you're looking at your hands and you're like, oh shit, dude, this is gonna be really painful. But I got to get back in and finish this thing. How many people just walk out the door and never came back?
Yeah. I mean,
Probably
you
a
know,
lot.
we've become good friends with Joe DeSena, who's the founder of the Spartan Race, and his
yeah.
whole thing. I mean, he's so hilarious, and his whole thing is about, man, like human beings need to do hard things. You know, we also we know Michael Easter, who wrote this book called The Comfort Crisis, but you know, we're not as human beings meant to just be comfortable all the time. Like it's important for us to do difficult things and push our limits and learn how to be uncomfortable and become resilient. And you know, those guys are doing really good work trying to get people out of their comfort zone.
Well, that was in David Sinclair's book, Life. I think it was
Yeah,
Lifespan.
lifespan. Yeah.
I always had searched a little bit for what the reason, like, why does hot and cold exposure help us? And his whole thing is when you put yourself in situations where you're kind of close to death, where all of a sudden, you know, like we're in your neighbor's sauna and it's like 220 degrees, and all of a sudden you get that like little breath in, you're like, I got to get out of here before somebody dies.
I'm
Like,
going to die.
Yes.
that moment of like, holy shit, I'm going to die, is when you get positive gene expression. Same thing when you go into the cold and you see people like freeze up. And I was kind of wondering for me, like why I don't have that response in the cold. And it's like, because the cold doesn't like create that environment for you.
That's right.
Probably because we surfed in cold water. We've lived in cold water, ice baths. I mean, it just doesn't cause me any issues, just probably like you guys too. But that heat, when we were in your buddy's sauna and it was like 220, 240 degrees, and all of a sudden
That's
you
not
walk in,
hyperbole.
like,
It was that hot.
Yeah.
it was that
And
hot.
I mean,
Kelly's
I
head
think,
was so red. Like,
and also, you know, there's,
Amazing.
Yes.
you know,
True.
people are doing so much research now to research on sauning, and there's great research that it's useful for so many things. And now they're, you know, people are backfilling a bunch of research on the benefits of cold plunging as well. But I mean, to me, just that, you know, doing something difficult and getting uncomfortable has immense value in and of itself, like regardless of whether we fill in a bunch of technical research about, you know, how it's impacting our cells or whatever, like that alone is reason enough for me to want to, you know, sauna and ice bath. And in my case, you know, my heart is really close to the front of my body, John, unlike you and Kelly's, where it's like, you know, 50 feet in there, your heart's. So the cold is really difficult for me.
Baby, it's called surface to volume ratio. You're a little
I
radiator.
always tell him, he gets
John
it,
and I are
he's
speeders.
like you don't understand. Your heart is like, it's way in there, like it's way down. Like,
well,
there's
you,
so
you
much
also have a
tissue.
much bigger heart. We just have these tiny, tiny little hearts that are hidden
Yeah,
inside
little-
of like encased in lots of stone.
You're not wrong. Guys, thank you so much for
Dude,
chatting
thank
us
you
up
for
about
coming on.
Built to
This
Move.
was amazing. The book is great. If people want more information, obviously they can find you on social at the Ready State. But if they want to get into the book, it's on Amazon. It's anywhere.
It's anywhere. You can, if you can learn more, go to builttomove.com. But yeah, Amazon, go pick it up on Amazon.
And it
Buy,
drops
buy a copy for your neighbor and your friend.
when it drops. We also have a 21-day Built to Move challenge. It's basically a program to show you how to feather these things into your life. So you get some emails, get some drips, get some video content just to support the book, like a video journal kind of thing that goes along with the books, especially if you're saying, hey, I need support with this, or I want to bring this to my work or my friends or my neighbors or my family. We've tried to create some resources for you there too.
Amazing. Well, you heard it here first. Go check it out. And if you want more information, you know how to get a hold of them. So thanks for tuning in. Another episode of Power Athlete Radio.
Bye.
Bye.